He threw a party to celebrate his empire. He never noticed his wife was left to die inside it. If a man like Roman DeLuca can look a woman in the eyes every morning and feel nothing, what does that make the love he thought he had? What does it make the child she carried alone through smoke and blood and silence? Watch this story until the end. If it moves you, hit like and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The champagne was real. The smiles were not. Roman DeLuca stood at the top of the curved staircase in the east wing of the Ashford estate, his estate now, though he still thought of it in those terms sometimes, as a thing he had absorbed rather than earned. And he looked down at 300 people who were afraid of him and called it loyalty. Crystal chandeliers threw gold light across marble floors. Women in floor-length gowns moved between men in tailored suits. A string quartet played something European near the West Terrace. Waitstaff in white gloves carried trays of crystal and oysters and things Roman had never eaten before he was 30, but had learned to prefer because preference was its own kind of armor. He looked good tonight. He knew it the way a man knows when a weapon is loaded. The charcoal brioni, the silver at his temples, the kind of stillness that made rooms quiet when he entered them. Roman DeLuca was 43 years old, and at the absolute peak of what he had built, and tonight was supposed to prove it. His wife stood near the garden terrace. He saw her from across the room, the way you notice furniture you've stopped seeing. The shape of it, the placement, the fact that it exists. Serena Ashford DeLuca was 7 months pregnant and still the most composed woman in the building. She wore a deep navy dress that moved with her like water. Her dark hair was pinned. Her posture was the posture of a woman who had been taught since childhood that how you stood was the first thing people decided about you. She was speaking to the wife of a federal judge, nodding at something the woman said, and her face was calm and pleasant and entirely unreadable. Roman watched her for 4 seconds. Then his phone vibrated in his breast pocket, and he turned away to answer it. That was the marriage, distilled. He had married Serena Ashford 3 years ago because the Ashford name still carried weight in the legitimate sector, and because Serena herself was sharp and controlled and had never once asked him a direct question about his business. That was the kind of woman you married when your business was what Roman's was. She understood the shape of the arrangement. She accepted it. In the first year, she had even seemed content or something close to it. Quiet dinners, a garden she cultivated herself, an occasional night where they lay in the same bed and the silence between them was not hostile. Then she became pregnant, and Roman had felt something move in him briefly, some old animal thing, and for about 3 weeks he had tried. He had come home for dinner. He had put his hand on her stomach when she asked him to. Then Marcus had called about the Delgado situation, and the 3 weeks ended and Roman went back to being Roman. He found Vivian at the far end of the champagne bar. Vivian Cross was 40, all clean lines and calculated warmth, and she had been Roman's in the ways that mattered for 11 years. She was not soft. She did not make him feel safe. She made him feel understood in the specific way that people who operate in darkness understand each other. Without flinching, without judgment, with a kind of cold precision that he had mistaken for intimacy so many times it had become impossible to separate the two. She was wearing red because Vivian always wore red to events where she was supposed to be invisible, and Roman had given up years ago asking her to stop. "You're staring," she said without turning. "You're wearing red." "I always wear red." "You always start arguments." She turned then and looked at him with those dark eyes that had never once looked at him with actual tenderness, and he told himself that was fine. Tenderness made men slow. He took the glass of champagne she offered. "The Corsetti people are here," she said. "I know. They brought their lawyer. I know that too." "Roman," her voice dropped half a register, "this is a party. Stop cataloging threats and be present." "I am present." "You're surveilling." He drank the champagne. It was excellent, and he barely tasted it. Across the room he could see Marcus Kane moving along the outer edge of the crowd the way Marcus always moved. Slowly, without urgency, with the particular ease of a man who has mapped every room he has ever entered. Marcus was 48, former military, built like a structure rather than a person. He had been with Roman for 16 years. He was the only man alive Roman trusted completely and without qualification, which was a thing Roman said to himself without examining it too closely, because some trusts are too old to audit. Marcus caught his eye and nodded once. Roman nodded back. The clock on the east wall read 11:40. 20 minutes to midnight. 20 minutes to the toast. Then they would announce the name. Ethan, Serena had chosen it, and Roman had agreed without offering an alternative. And the room would applaud, and the cameras would flash, and Roman DeLuca would stand at the apex of everything he had made and prove to every person in that room that the DeLuca organization was not weakened by the rival family pressure of the past year, was not fractured by the Delgado defections, was not afraid. That was the plan. He left Vivian at the bar. He told himself he would find Serena before midnight, stand beside her for the toast, put his hand on her back where people could see it. He told himself this the way he told himself a lot of things, with intent but without urgency, which is a different thing entirely. He never made it to her side. At 11:47, the lights died. Not a flicker, not a surge, and a recovery. Total extinction. Every chandelier, every sconce, every ambient light source in the estate went black simultaneously, and in the quarter second of absolute darkness before the human animal could process what was happening, Roman felt the hairs on his forearms stand up the way they had not stood since Bogota, 11 years ago, the night someone had left 3 bodies in the hotel corridor outside his room. Then the shooting started. Not handguns. The sound was wrong for handguns. Too heavy, too fast. The signature of suppressed automatic weapons, which meant trained people, which meant this was not opportunistic, which meant someone had been planning this for a very long time. The screaming started a half second after the first burst, and the crowd, 300 people who had been drinking champagne and talking about real estate, became immediately, catastrophically unmanageable. Roman moved without thinking. His hand found the Sig Sauer at the small of his back. He dropped low, used the overturned catering table as cover, tried to locate the vectors of fire. East entrance, garden terrace. 2 shooters minimum at the terrace. The east entrance was worse. Automatic fire and sustained bursts, disciplined spacing, someone who had done this before. The marble floor around him was already scattered with broken crystal and abandoned shoes and a woman's clutch that had come open, lipstick rolling across the tile. A hand found his elbow in the dark. Marcus. Back corridor, Marcus said into his ear. His voice was absolutely level, which was what Roman needed, which was what Marcus always provided. The eastern tunnel, now. I have 6 men on point. Serena? She has 4 guards on her detail. She's in the north corridor with the other women. She's protected. Roman, we have to move. Somewhere behind them, glass exploded. The screaming intensified and then changed pitch, which meant someone had been hit. Roman's body wanted to go toward the sound the way a doctor's body or a soldier's body would, toward damage, toward the source. He had spent 20 years teaching himself that impulse. He had built an empire on it. Vivian, he said. A beat, short, the kind that, in other circumstances, on a different night, he might have noticed. But the shooting was getting closer, and his mind was prioritizing, and that single beat from Marcus disappeared into the noise. With me, Marcus said. She came to me when the lights went. She's already at the corridor entrance. Roman moved. The back corridor was narrow. A service passage, stone walls. The kind of route that exists in old estates because old money always built itself escape hatches. Roman's hand stayed on the Signor Marcus, moved ahead of him. Behind Marcus, Vivian, in her red dress, breathing hard but not panicking, which was one of the things Roman had always respected about her. She did not panic. The gunfire above was growing louder, which meant the assault was pushing inward. They went through a steel door, down a flight of stairs, into the underground passage that Roman had installed 2 years ago when he bought the estate. He had thought it was paranoia. He now understood it was prophecy. He thought of Serena for the length of a breath. North corridor, 4 guards, protected. He kept moving. Serena heard the first burst of fire from the north salon, where she had gone to sit because the noise of the party had started to make her head pound, and the baby had been pressing against her rib cage since 9 o'clock, and she needed 5 minutes of quiet. She was alone. She had sent the 2 guards who'd been with her to bring her water and to find Roman's assistant to ask about the midnight timeline, when the lights died and the world became noise. Her first feeling was not fear. It was something colder than fear and more precise. It was the recognition that she was alone in a dark room in the north end of a building that was currently under attack, and that she was 7 months pregnant and that no one was coming. She put her hand on her stomach and breathed. The guard she had sent away did not return. She tried the light switch. Nothing. She tried her phone, signal, but when she called Roman, the line rang and went to voicemail. She called the estate security line. Same result. She stood in the dark and listened to the automatic fire and the screaming, and she understood, with the specific clarity that comes when the body strips everything down to pure function, that she needed to move. She knew the north end of this house better than Roman did. She had lived here while he traveled. She had walked these corridors in the early mornings when sleep wouldn't come, tracing the layout the way you trace the face of a place you're not sure you belong to. She knew about the service exit behind the kitchen larder on the north wing's ground floor, a door that opened to the back road that ran along the estate's eastern boundary, a road that almost no one used because it connected to nothing important. She moved toward it in the dark, one hand on the wall, one hand on her stomach. The marble floors were cold through her heels. She lost one shoe on the stairs and didn't stop to find it. At the base of the north staircase, she heard voices, male, speaking in clipped syllables, the cadence of operational communication rather than panic, and she pressed herself into a doorway and held her breath and waited until they passed. 3 men. None of them were Roman's guards. She recognized none of their faces in the thin light of a phone screen one of them was using as a torch. They were not looking for her. They were moving toward the main hall, but the fact that they moved with that kind of focus and coordinated silence told her everything she needed to know about what this was. This was not random. She found the larder. She found the service exit. The door had a deadbolt that stuck, and she had to put her shoulder against it twice before it gave, which sent a spike of pain through her side that she cataloged and set aside because there was no time for it. The night air hit her face, August, still humid, the smell of the bay somewhere beyond the tree line, and she walked out into the dark. The back road was gravel. She walked on the grass beside it because the gravel would be loud. She walked for what her legs told her was a quarter mile, which felt like 3, and then her side stopped being a spike of pain and became something more serious, something that sat low and spread, and she pressed her hand against the place where the shrapnel, she didn't know yet that it was shrapnel, she thought it was the fall, the door, had opened a cut along her ribs. When she felt the wetness, she stopped walking, looked at her hand in the dark, brought her phone up for light. The blood was dark and there was enough of it. She kept walking. The headlights found her 20 minutes later. A man driving back from a supply run on the rural route, a large truck, an ordinary person in an extraordinary moment. He pulled over before she had to wave him down. He was out of the truck before she reached the door. He said something she didn't fully register because the pain had clarified itself by then into something bright and consuming, and what she heard instead of his words was the sound of her own breathing, which was wrong. "I need a hospital," she said, "and I need you to understand that no one can know I'm alive." He stared at her. She stared back. 7 months pregnant, 1 shoe, blood soaking the side of her dress, eyes completely steady. He said, "Get in, Mab." They put her under in the OR. She remembered the ceiling tiles. She remembered the light. She remembered the anesthesiologist saying her name, not DeLuca. She had given a different name at intake. She had done that in the parking lot while the man in the truck was talking to the ER nurse. She had used a name she'd held in reserve since the 2nd year of her marriage, the way some women hold certain knowledge in reserve, not planning to use it, hoping they'll never have to. And then the light got very large and flat, and she went somewhere dark and painless. She woke to the sound of machines and the weight of a blanket that was too thin and the immediate animal awareness of whether her body still carried what it had been carrying. A nurse was in the room, young, tired, the specific exhaustion of an overnight shift. "Your son is fine," the nurse said before Serena could ask. "He's in the NICU as a precaution. He's breathing on his own. He's healthy." The word, son, landed with a weight Serena hadn't expected. She had known it intellectually since the ultrasound at 20 weeks. But the word in the nurse's voice, past tense now, accomplished rather than anticipated, made it real in a way the ultrasound had not. Son. She had a son. She lay in the hospital bed in the name that wasn't her name, and she thought about Roman. She thought about the phone that had rung and woke. She thought about the 4 guards who had never come back. She thought about the fact that she had been in that house for 7 months, in the North Corridor, in the room he knew she used, and that not one person with access to the estate's security apparatus had found their way to her in the dark. She thought about Marcus Kane, who had been running that apparatus for as long as she could remember, who moved through that house like he owned it, who had looked at her across dining tables for 3 years with a particular kind of careful neutrality that she had told herself was professionalism, and now wondered, lying in a hospital bed at 2 in the morning, if it had been something else. On the 3rd day, she saw the news. The Ashford estate attack. 8 dead, including 2 DeLuca organization members. 17 injured. Roman DeLuca was confirmed alive. He had made a statement. Brief, controlled. The language of a man who had been through something terrible and was already past the grief stage and into the operational response. He did not mention his wife. Not as missing. Not as unaccounted for. Not as anything. Serena read the statement twice. She put the phone face down on the hospital blanket. She looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then she called for the nurse and asked about the discharge process. She was going to disappear. She had decided. Not from fear, not from weakness. She understood the difference and had always understood it, even when the people around her assumed the opposite because she was quiet and composed and did not raise her voice. She was going to disappear because she was a woman who had just given birth alone in a hospital under a false name with shrapnel wounds in her side, after being left to die in a burning house by a man she had spent 3 years trying to find a reason to love. She was going to disappear because her son was not going to grow up in that orbit, in that specific mixture of power and indifference and ornamental love that Roman DeLuca had perfected into an art form. She named him Ethan, the name she had chosen before any of this. She kept that. She took her son, and she left. She had enough. Her own accounts, money that predated the marriage, the financial foresight of a woman who had grown up watching her mother negotiate from weakness and had decided at 19 that she would never be in that position. She had planned for the possibility of leaving, the way you plan for weather, knowing it might never come, but keeping the umbrella close. The umbrella was closer than she had expected. She walked out of Mercer County General Hospital on a Thursday morning with Ethan in her arms and a bag she'd had a social worker help her build over 3 days, and she got into a car that she had arranged, and she drove north, and she did not look back. She did not know yet what Marcus and Vivian were telling Roman. She did not know about the photographs, the story they were constructing, the version of her they were building in the wreckage of the night, a version in which Serena had taken advantage of the chaos, had walked out of her own accord, had been planning it for months. A version designed to be believed by a man already inclined toward certain assumptions about loyalty and about women who had never quite fit the life he'd made for them. She didn't know any of it yet. What she knew was the weight of her son in her arms, the cold November air, the road ahead, which was long and unfamiliar and entirely her own. 2 years, she told herself. She would give herself 2 years to become someone who could not be found. Someone who had buried the name DeLuca so deep it would take an excavation to retrieve it. 2 years to build something that belonged to her and Ethan and no one else. 2 years. And somewhere in that clean, cold future she was already imagining, she did not account for the possibility that fate has no interest in timelines, that the world is smaller than grief makes it feel, or that a boy named Ethan DeLuca, her boy, Roman's boy, a child built from the wreckage of a marriage that should never have happened, would carry in his face an inheritance that no distance could erase. She did not account for any of it. She just drove. The morning after the attack, Roman DeLuca sat in a folding chair in a warehouse on the south side of Caldwell and did not speak for 47 minutes. His men gave him space. They had learned over 16 years that Roman's silence was not the silence of a man who had nothing to say. It was the silence of a man deciding how much of what he was feeling he would allow to exist before locking the rest of it somewhere that light couldn't reach. They brought him coffee. They brought him a change of clothes. They stood near the exits and watched the street and waited for him to come back to himself. Marcus sat across from him, not close, not hovering. Marcus understood Roman's silence better than anyone, or gave the impression of understanding it, which over 16 years had become the same thing. At the 48th minute, Roman said, 12 names. I want them in 48 hours. We're already pulling threads, Marcus said. I don't want threads, I want names. Roman, 12 men came into my house. 12 minimum, given the fire pattern. Someone funded it. Someone planned the timing. I want the chain, from the bottom to whoever wrote the check. He looked up then, and his eyes had that particular quality they got when the grief had finished burning and left only the operational residue behind. Flat, functional, the color of something extinguished. Where are we on the guest list? Cross-referencing now, the Corsetti family is the obvious first look given the timing and last month's. Don't give me the obvious first look. Give me the one that doesn't fit. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Just a moment. We'll work every angle. Roman nodded. He picked up the coffee. He drank it cold. Serena, he said. The word landed in the air between them, and Marcus met it without visible reaction, which was itself a kind of reaction. We've been through the North Corridor, Marcus said. The guards assigned to her detail, 2 of them were found near the east entrance, caught in the initial crossfire. We're still locating the other 2. She wasn't in the corridor. No. So she moved. It looks that way. Roman. Marcus leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the posture of a man about to say something difficult with appropriate difficulty. There's another possibility we have to consider. Roman looked at him. She left before the attack. The cameras on the North Service exit. Marcus paused in a way that was clearly calibrated, the pause of someone who had rehearsed how long to wait. There's footage of someone matching her description going through that exit at 11:30, before the first shots. Roman was still. That's 17 minutes before it started, he said. Yes. She was gone before it started. The angle isn't clean. We can't confirm it's her, but the build, the dress. You're telling me she walked out. Marcus did not confirm or deny. He held his expression at the precise midpoint between reluctance and honesty, which is a place that requires practice to find and hold. I'm telling you, we have to look at every possibility. We have people checking the surrounding roads. We have inquiries going to area hospitals. Roman put the coffee cup down on the concrete floor very carefully. The care he used doing it said more than anything else could have. Find her, he said. Just find her. I don't want theories. I want her location. They didn't find her. Not in 48 hours. Not in a week. The hospitals came back clean. No woman matching Serena DeLuca's description had been admitted anywhere within a 70-mile radius, Marcus reported. No credit card activity on her personal account since the night of the attack. No phone pings after 11:20 p.m. No contact with her family in Boston, whom Marcus had people watch quietly for 2 weeks. What they found instead was a camera angle. Marcus brought it to Roman on day 9. He sat down across from Roman in the Caldwell warehouse, which had become their temporary base of operations while the estate was processed by investigators and then quietly returned to DeLuca control, and he put a tablet on the table between them and played a 12-second clip. The angle was from the exterior security camera on the North Service Road. The timestamp read 11:31 p.m. A figure in a dark dress moved through the service exit door and walked, not ran, walked, down the road away from the house. The figure moved without looking back. The quality was exactly poor enough to be inconclusive and exactly clear enough to be suggestive, and Roman watched it once without expression and then watched it again. She's not running, he said. No. Someone running is scared. Someone walking knows where they're going. Marcus said nothing. Roman put the tablet face down on the table. He pressed his thumb against the bridge of his nose and held it there. In the warehouse around them, 3 of his men were working laptops. The Corsetti lead had gone cold. The family had reached out through intermediaries with expressions of shock that were either genuine or expensive, and Roman's read on the Corsetti patriarch was that he was too old and too comfortable to have ordered something this complex. Someone younger, someone with more to prove or more to gain. He kept coming back to the footage. Vivian had been watching him from across the warehouse for 20 minutes. She came to him now the way she always came to him, without asking permission, which was the thing he had always allowed her and now wondered about, in the back of his mind, in the place where unexamined things lived. She sat on the edge of the table and looked at the overturned tablet. You keep watching it, she said. It doesn't make sense. It makes a certain kind of sense. He looked at her. I'm not trying to hurt you, Vivian said. I'm trying to be honest with you, because that's what I've always done, even when it cost me." She held his gaze. Her voice was level in that way that always preceded something pointed. "You and I both know this marriage was not what she wanted. You know that. What she wanted doesn't determine what she did. Roman, she was 7 months pregnant and alone in that house because you had been emotionally absent from that marriage for 6 months. She had money, she had means, she had reasons." Vivian paused. "I'm not saying she knew about the attack. I'm saying she may have decided to use it." The silence between them was thick and directional, like weather. "Use it," Roman repeated. "Disappear. Take the child. Start over somewhere with DeLuca money and the DeLuca name and no Roman DeLuca." He stood up, walked to the warehouse's high window and looked at the strip of gray November sky above the roofline. His hands were in his pockets. His shoulders were the shoulders of a man holding himself together by force of habit because he had forgotten what the alternative looked like. "She could be dead," he said. "She could be. I'm not going to assume—" "I know." Vivian's voice did not soften, but it adjusted. A small calibration, a degree of warmth inserted precisely where it would have the most effect. "I know you, Roman. You won't assume the worst about her. That's not who you are. But it's also not who she is. She's not some passive woman who'd get caught in the crossfire and disappear. She's an Ashford. They survive. They plan." Roman said nothing for a long time. Outside, a truck moved down the street below. The sound of it filled the warehouse and faded. "Keep looking," he finally said. 2 more weeks." Vivian nodded. She didn't push. She was too skilled at this to push. But 2 more weeks found nothing. By the end of the 3rd week, the nothing had acquired a shape. The absence of hospital records, of family contact, of financial movement, of any traceable physical presence. These absences stacked together told a story. Not the story Marcus and Vivian were building, not exactly, but the story was using their architecture. Roman was not a man who let himself be guided by emotion in operational matters. He had built an empire by being clear-eyed about human behavior, and the clear-eyed reading of the available evidence, arranged the way it was arranged, suggested what Marcus had suggested from day 9. She left. Roman let himself believe it on a Tuesday morning, which was an ordinary day, overcast, nothing marking it as the day the marriage finally died. He sat with the belief for about 10 minutes, examining it from different angles the way you examine a wound, checking the depth, assessing the damage. Then he put it in the same place he put everything he couldn't use and went back to work. He did not grieve because grieving required the admission of loss, and the version of events he had accepted did not include a loss. It included a betrayal, and those were different things. Betrayal you respond to. Betrayal has an action attached. Grief just sits there. He went back to work. The work was bad. The attack had cost him 8 people, including Danny Rourke, who had been with him since Bogota and whose death Roman felt in a physical location somewhere below his sternum that he didn't examine. It had cost him the estate. Not technically, the property was still his, but the estate was contaminated now, too visible, too documented, and within a month he had his lawyers begin the process of preparing it for sale. It had cost him standing, not with his own people who responded to adversity by closing ranks, but in the wider landscape of the criminal economy, where a man whose house gets hit is a man who might be worth hitting again. The first 6 months were about proving that assessment wrong. Roman moved their base of operations 3 times. He consolidated personnel, people he had verified, people Marcus had cleared, people whose loyalty had been tested under conditions that left no room for pretending. He restructured the money with the help of a financial architect he trusted, shifted assets, buried exposure. He rebuilt the security infrastructure from the ground up, new protocols, new communication channels, new everything. He was good at this. He had always been better at rebuilding than at sustaining, which was perhaps the central truth about him that he had never fully confronted. Marcus was everywhere during this period. That was the right word? Everywhere. In the meetings and outside them, processing intelligence and managing personnel, and interfacing with the organization's various legitimate-facing entities. He had always been capable, but he had always been Roman's instrument of capability. What happened in the 6 months after the attack was something with a different shape. Marcus became less an instrument and more a system, less a lieutenant and more an architecture. Roman was too busy fighting fires on multiple fronts to notice the transition as it happened, which was, of course, the point. Vivian moved into the building where Roman had taken a floor. She did not ask. She told him she was staying and he did not object, and not objecting became the same as agreeing, which became the same as something else. She was useful in the acute phase. She had connections he didn't, information sources she'd cultivated independently, a reading of the political landscape of their world that complemented his own. She was also present in ways that filled space, which Roman allowed because empty space in a building where you're sleeping has a way of amplifying things you'd prefer not to hear. He did not love Vivian. He knew this. He thought she knew it too, and that she had made her peace with the arrangement as it was, and that the arrangement worked for both of them in the specific, functional way that relationships built on mutual utility can work when neither party asks for more than the arrangement provides. He did not think about whether Vivian wanted more than the arrangement provided. He did not think, during this period, about very many things that were not operational. This was deliberate. This was how Roman had survived 43 years of a life that had tried to kill him repeatedly, by converting the unbearable into the procedural, by finding the task in the feeling and doing the task instead of sitting with the feeling. It worked. It had always worked. What it left behind him, accumulating in his wake, was not his problem. It was the problem of the people who stayed in his orbit after the storms passed. Ethan was born somewhere he didn't know about, on a night he would never be able to account for. He had no idea he had a son. 7 months after the attack, Marcus came to Roman with a name. They were in the new operations center, a converted commercial space on the 12th floor of a building Roman owned through 3 layers of corporate structure, clean and anonymous, and about as far from the marble-floored grandeur of the Ashford estate as you could get while remaining in the same city. Marcus put a folder on the desk, a name on the cover, Brennan Hoyle. Mid-level coordinator for the Voss network, Marcus said. He was the logistics lead for the assault. Roman opened the folder. Photographs, financial records, 2 pages of raw intelligence. He read without speaking. He's been moving product through a Voss-controlled freight company out of the port, Marcus continued. That network also has ties to the Delgado people who defected last year. We think the funding for the attack came through that channel. You think. It's a high-confidence read, 70 to 80%. Roman looked at the photographs. Brennan Hoyle was 41, thick-necked, the face of a man who moved other people's money and never touched the frontline work himself. He had a house in the suburbs, children in a private school, a life with soft edges. Bring him in, Roman said. Quiet. I want to talk to him before anyone else does. Already being arranged. Roman closed the folder. He looked at Marcus for a moment. Marcus looked back, level, professional, 16 years of shared history in the room between them. You're sure about Hoyle, Roman said. Sure as we can be. And the source on this? Independent. Someone inside the Voss freight operation who has his own reasons for wanting the Voss network dismantled. Roman nodded slowly. An independent source inside an enemy operation who comes to us voluntarily. It happens. It does, Roman said. It also gets manufactured. Marcus held his gaze without a flicker. I ran the provenance myself. 3 independent verifications. Roman, I understand the caution. After what happened, the caution is correct. But this is solid. Roman looked at the folder for another moment. Then he said, Set it up. He did not see the thing he would have seen if he had been looking for it. If the past 7 months had not scoured his perceptions down to the operational and left the finer registers damaged. The way Marcus said the word independent. The specific smoothness of the provenance explanation, the kind of smoothness that comes from having told a story enough times that the rough edges are all worn off. The way Marcus's eyes had moved just slightly, left and then back, in the half-second before he said, I ran the provenance myself. Roman did not see any of it. He took the folder and went back to work. Brennan Hoyle was brought in 4 days later. He lasted 6 hours before he told them everything he knew, which was not nothing, but was also not what the folder had promised. Hoyle was a link in a chain, But the chain his information traced went back to the Delgado defectors, and the Delgado defectors were dead ends, and the specific financial routing that would have identified the original source of the attack funding had a gap in it that Hoyle couldn't fill because he had never known what was on the other side of that gap. Roman sat across from Hoyle in a room with concrete walls and a drain in the floor and felt the information settle into an unsatisfying shape. "Who gave you the target?" he asked. Hoyle was in bad shape by then. His voice was coming out wrong. "I told you. It came through Delgado's man, Arellano. He's gone. I told you. He went dark before Arellano. The origin. Who designed the operation?" "I don't know that. I swear to you I don't know that. I got a contract and specifications and I managed logistics. That's what I did. I never met the principal." "The specifications," Roman said. "What did they tell you? Entry points, security blind spots, the timing, the route for the primary extraction." "The primary extraction. The target extraction. The person they wanted out safe." Roman was very still. "What person?" Hoyle looked at him with the eyes of a man who understood he had just said something he shouldn't have said and was trying to calculate whether the damage was already done or whether there was still a version of this conversation where he survived it. His calculation took too long. "What person, Hoyle?" "I don't know the name. I was given a description. Female. I was told she was a priority extraction, that she needed to get out before the shooting started." He swallowed. "I assumed she was an asset. Someone on the inside of the DeLuca organization that the principal wanted extracted before the assault so she wouldn't get caught in it." The room was absolutely quiet. Roman's hands were flat on the table between them. He looked at them. He was aware of his own breathing in a way he was not usually aware of it. The mechanics of it, the work of it, the fact that it was continuing. "A woman," he said. "Yes." "Extracted before the shooting." "That's what the spec said. Priority extraction. North exit 11:30. She'd be moving on her own. Don't interfere." Roman stood up. He did not say anything else to Hoyle. He walked out of the room and into the corridor and stood against the wall with his hands at his sides and stared at the opposite wall and breathed. North exit. 11:30. The camera footage Marcus had shown him. 11:31. A figure in a dark dress walking away without looking back. He had been told it might be Serena. He had not been told that the attack specifications included her extraction. Her extraction, not her targeting, not her elimination, but her removal, her protection, her departure engineered into the assault like a stage direction. She had walked out at 11:30 because she had been told to walk out at 11:30 by someone who needed her out of the building before the shooting started. Or she had not been told anything, or the extraction spec was written not to protect her but to account for her, the way you account for a complication in an operation, the way you build around an obstacle that can't be removed. The woman in that house that someone needed moved before the assault. Moved, not hurt. Because hurting her would have been a problem. Because a dead pregnant woman would have brought a response that even the people planning this attack were not prepared to manage. Roman put his fist against the wall. He thought about the 4 guards on Serena's detail. The 2 found in the east corridor Betrayals, nowhere near the north end where they were supposed to be stationed. The other 2, unaccounted for, never found, reported eventually as having fled during the chaos, cleared by Marcus after a review that Roman had not personally supervised because he had trusted Marcus to supervise it. He pushed off the wall and walked back to the operations floor. Marcus was at a standing desk, working a phone call. He looked up when Roman came through the door, read something in Roman's face that made him end the call mid-sentence, and turned to face him fully. "Who wrote the extraction spec?" Roman said. Marcus's expression did not change. That was what Roman would remember later, not a flicker, not a tell, not a single micro-expression out of place. He had been looking at this face for 16 years, and he was looking at it now and seeing for the first time the effort underneath the steadiness. "Say that again," Marcus said. "The assault on my house had an extraction specification built into it. A woman, north exit, 11:30, priority protection." Roman stopped 6 feet from him. "Who wrote it?" "Where's this coming from? Answer the question." "Roman, if Hoyle told you." "Marcus, His voice dropped. It went somewhere below confrontation, somewhere that had no name but that everyone in that room immediately recognized, and the two men working laptops in the far corner went very still. If you're about to explain this to me, I need you to be certain that the explanation you give me is the exact truth. I need you to understand what happens if it isn't. Marcus looked at him for a long, measured moment. The speck you're describing, he said carefully, was in the intelligence we recovered from the Hoyle operation. It refers to a DeLuca asset, someone embedded in the organization who is flagged for protection. Standard practice, when you've got an inside connection, you don't want caught in the crossfire of your own operation. It doesn't refer to Serena. How do you know what it refers to if you're only hearing about it now? 3 seconds of silence. Because, Marcus said, I've seen partial versions of the same document. The Hoyle file was incomplete. The full version... Stop. Marcus stopped. Roman looked at him. Really looked at him. The way you look at a structure you've been living in when someone tells you the foundation might be compromised, scanning for the cracks you trained yourself not to see because seeing them would mean you couldn't stay inside. Get out, Roman said to the two men at the laptops. They got out. The door closed. Roman and Marcus stood in the empty room with 16 years of shared history between them, and Roman felt it shift. Not break, not yet, but shift, the way weight shifts before something gives way. And he understood, in the specific place where he kept the things he didn't want to know, that he was standing at the edge of something he could not come back from once he saw it clearly. I'm going to ask you one question, Roman said, and I need you to hear what I'm actually asking. Marcus waited. When you showed me that camera footage from the North Service Road, Roman said, the footage of the woman walking out at 11:31, did you know, when you showed it to me, that the attack specifications included a coordinated extraction from the north exit at 11:30? The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. In 16 years, Marcus Kane had never needed 4 seconds to answer a direct question. Roman felt something cold settle into the center of his chest and stay there. Marcus Kane did not answer the question. Not in 4 seconds. Not in 8. Not in the 12 seconds that Roman stood in the center of that empty room and watched the face of the man he had trusted longer than he had trusted anyone alive. Longer than Vivian. Longer than any of the dead men whose deaths he had mourned and avenged and built monuments to inside the architecture of his own choices. 12 seconds of silence from a man who had never in 16 years needed more than 2. Then Marcus said, "You're not thinking clearly. Answer the question. You've been in a room with Hoyle for 6 hours, and you've come out with a theory built on the word of a man who would have told you the earth was flat if he thought it would buy him another hour. Marcus, Roman, listen to me. Did you know?" 3 words, no inflection. The voice of a man who has already left the room emotionally and is operating on something older than feeling. When you showed me that footage, did you know the spec included an extraction from that exit at that time? The silence this time was different. It had a texture. It had the specific quality of a man deciding not between truth and lie, but between which lie still had a chance of working. "I need you to sit down," Marcus said. "I'm standing." "Roman, say yes or say no." Marcus looked at him for one more moment. Then something in his face changed. Not collapsed, not broke, but settled, the way a mask settles when the face underneath is tired of holding it up. He pulled out the chair nearest him and sat down in it, and the act of sitting down, the deliberateness of it, the comfort of it, was the answer Roman had been looking for. Roman's right hand moved toward the cig at his hip and stopped. He made himself stop it. He stood with his hand at his side and breathed and looked at the man sitting across from him and understood that the next 60 seconds would determine the shape of everything that came after. "Start talking," Roman said. Marcus looked at the table in front of him. He turned his phone over once, face down, face up, face down, a gesture Roman had never seen him make in 16 years and which told him more than anything Marcus was about to say. Then Marcus looked up. "It wasn't supposed to go the way it went," he said. The room got very quiet. Outside, the city made its noises, trucks, wind. the indifferent mechanical sound of a world that did not know or care what was happening on the 12th floor of an anonymous building on Calloway Street. "Keep going," Roman said. "The original plan—" Marcus stopped, started again. There was a window, a 2-year window where the organization could have been restructured. The Delgado defections, the pressure from the Voss network, the federal attention after the Harmon situation. Roman, you were carrying too much exposure. The empire was top-heavy, and the foundations were compromised, and if you had kept operating the way you were operating, the whole thing would have come down inside 2 years anyway. I'd been watching the math on it for 18 months. So you decided to speed it up. I decided to control it. Marcus's voice was steady, not defensive. That was the thing that made Roman's stomach turn. The voice of a man who had thought about this so long and so thoroughly that he had made peace with it, had translated it into something that lived in the same register as reason rather than betrayal. A controlled transfer. The Voss contract was already on the table. They wanted DeLuca infrastructure, the port connections, the distribution channels. Not a hostile acquisition, a structured one. I negotiated the terms for 14 months before the party. You sold my organization. I restructured it, with you out of the picture temporarily, long enough for the legal exposure to be managed, for the transition documents to be. You tried to have me killed at my own party. Roman's voice did not rise. This was the thing about Roman DeLuca that everyone in his world had learned eventually. The voice went down when the danger went up, went quiet when the rage was at its most complete. In front of 300 people, in front of my pregnant wife. You weren't the target. Marcus met his eyes. The assault was designed around your extraction, your protection. Roman, you got out through the tunnel because I built that into the operation. I told the assault team the primary was to be avoided, not engaged. Every shooter in that building had your description. You were never in danger. Roman stared at him. Serena, he began. Serena was... Marcus stopped. The first crack appeared, small, barely visible, in the line of his jaw. Serena was supposed to be handled. She had a security detail. They were supposed to move her to the East Wing before the assault started. The timing got compressed. There was a miscommunication on the interior team, and by the time what? By the time anyone checked on her detail, the assault had already initiated, and the North End was... Where were her guards, Marcus? Not a question, not anymore. Marcus was quiet. The 2 guards found in the East Corridor, Roman said, miles from their assigned position. The other 2, never found, cleared by you in a review that I trusted you to run because I trusted you. His voice had gone to somewhere below the basement of calm. Did you move them? The crack in Marcus's jaw widened. He was a man who had prepared for this conversation in the abstract, had run the versions of it, had built his answers. But he had prepared for a version of Roman who was still inside the shock, still looking for explanations, still leaving room for the possibility of innocent mismanagement. He had not adequately prepared for this version, for a Roman who had already done the math, who was only confirming the arithmetic he had already completed. They were reassigned, Marcus said. It was supposed to be temporary. There were supposed to be 2 other men covering that corridor during the gap. Supposed to be. The operation had a communication failure on the interior element. 2 of my interior men were compromised. They were with the Voss assault team, not with us. They didn't hold the corridor. They moved with the assault. By the time I knew the North End was uncovered, he stopped. She was alone, Roman said. Yes. 7 months pregnant, shrapnel in her side, alone in a dark house full of armed men, and you showed me camera footage of her walking out and told me she might have left on purpose. The word might, placed there 11 months ago with surgical precision to do a specific job which it had done. Marcus said nothing. And Vivian, Roman said. A different silence, smaller, more specific. How long, Roman said. Roman, how long has Vivian known? Marcus looked at the table. She was aware of the general architecture of the plan. She wasn't involved in the operational. Roman moved. Not toward Marcus. Away from him, toward the window, Because if he stood still for one more second in the same position, he was going to do something that foreclosed the conversation, and he needed the conversation, needed every word of it, needed to know the shape of the thing that had been living inside his organization and inside his life and inside his bed for the past year. He stood at the window with his back to Marcus and breathed. One breath, two. The city below was gray and ordinary and indifferent. The story you built, Roman said to the glass. Serena leaving, the camera footage, the hospital searches that came back clean. He stopped. How did the hospital searches come back clean? Behind him, silence. Marcus. The name she used at intake wasn't hers. We were searching under her name. There was no way to know. You knew she was injured. You knew she'd gone out through the north exit on foot at night in November, 7 months pregnant, and you searched under her legal name and you let the search run for 2 weeks, and then you told me she was gone. We didn't know the extent of the injury. We didn't know she could have died. Roman turned from the window. She could have died on that road, and my son could have died with her, and you would have come to me with clean hospital records and a camera clip, and I would have spent the rest of my life believing she walked out. Marcus looked at him. And in Marcus Kane's eyes, for the first time in 16 years, Roman saw the thing that had always been there and that he had never allowed himself to look at directly. Not guilt, not remorse, not any of the softer things, but calculation. The same calculation that had been there when Marcus presented the Hoyle intelligence, when he ran the Serena search, when he showed the camera footage, when he endorsed Vivian's reading of events in the warehouse. The perpetual, tireless calculation of a man who had decided, at some point so far back that the original decision was buried under years of execution, that Roman DeLuca's empire was a resource to be managed rather than a man to be served. Where is she? Roman said. I don't know. You have people everywhere. Roman, you genuinely what? You genuinely lost track of the woman whose exit from my house you built into the attack specifications and then buried under a narrative you and my mistress constructed together? He walked toward Marcus then, not fast, not with the energy of aggression, but with something more controlled and therefore more frightening. He stopped 2 feet from him. You're going to find her. And then what? Marcus said. Something had changed in his voice. The calculation surfacing more openly now, the mask not fully down but tilted, showing what was underneath. What's your plan, Roman? You find her, you bring her back into this life, into this organization which is under more federal scrutiny now than it's ever been, with a child, your child, exposed to everything that comes with the DeLuca name? You think that's better for her? You think that's what she wants? What she wants is not your determination to make. It wasn't yours either, and that's the whole problem. Marcus's voice hardened. 16 years of deference, of studied professionalism, of careful subordination, all of it falling away in layers, revealing the shape of what had been underneath it. You never saw her, Roman. She was in that house for 3 years, and you never once looked at her like she was a person rather than a piece of the structure. And you know I'm right. You know it. And you're standing here furious with me for what I did, but you also know that if I had come to you 18 months ago with a restructuring proposal and told you the cost was your marriage, you would have made the same calculation I made. Roman hit him. Not a controlled strike. Not the kind of violence Roman DeLuca applied with professional precision when professional precision was called for. The fist that connected with Marcus Kane's jaw was the fist of a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and who had just had the weight named by the person who put it there. Marcus went sideways out of the chair. He caught himself on the table edge. Blood came from his lip. He straightened slowly, one hand on the table, and looked at Roman with eyes that were clear and unsurprised. Feel better? Marcus said. Roman stood over him. His hand hurt. He didn't move it. You're done, Roman said. Everything you built in this organization, everything you embedded, every piece of infrastructure you control. I'm going to find it. Everyone. And when I find it, I'm going to make sure that when the federal people who are watching this organization make their next move, the only name attached to anything criminal is yours. Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face. Not fear, not quite, but a reassessment. The recalculation of a man who has realized the conversation has moved outside the boundaries he mapped. You should think about what you're saying, Marcus said quietly. I have thought about it. Roman, his voice dropped. You do not want me as an enemy. You've been my enemy since before I knew what an enemy was, Roman said. The difference is, now I know it. He walked out. He drove to Vivian's building with both hands on the wheel and his jaw set in 3 years of revised history reorganizing itself inside his skull. The elevator up to the floor felt very long. The hallway felt very long. He knocked on the door. He still had a key. He did not use it. Something in him refused to use it. And he waited. Vivian answered in a silk robe, a glass of wine in her hand, the practiced ease of a woman who had never once been caught genuinely off guard in her adult life. She looked at his face. She looked at his hand, the knuckles, the slight swelling. She did not ask. You talked to Marcus, she said. Come inside, he said. I'm already inside. You're the one standing in the hall. He came in. She stepped back to let him pass and then moved to the couch and sat and crossed one knee over the other and held the wine glass by the stem and watched him with those dark eyes that he had been reading wrong for 11 years. He stood in the center of her living room and looked at her and felt something that was not anger. Anger was too simple. But the specific sensation of a man who has just discovered that the map he has been navigating by was drawn by someone who wanted him lost. How long did you know about the plan? He said. Sit down, Roman. How long? She held his gaze. Then she said, Marcus came to me 14 months before the party. He laid out the restructuring case. I thought he was being, she paused, selected, ambitious. But you didn't come to me. He wasn't asking me to do anything. He was informing me, as a courtesy. As a courtesy, Roman repeated. He was planning to detonate my organization and remove me from it, and he came to you 14 months in advance as a courtesy. Vivian set the wine glass down on the table very carefully. He told me you'd be protected. He told me the transition was structured to keep you from federal exposure. He told you what was convenient for him to tell you. Yes, her voice was even. He probably did. And the story about Serena, you stood in front of me in that warehouse and you told me she might have used the attack to disappear. You said that to me. Vivian was quiet. Did you know she was injured? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. I suspected she hadn't left entirely on her own terms, based on what Marcus told me about the interior coordination failure. You suspected she was hurt and you told me she walked out. I told you it was possible she walked out. Roman, I was protecting what we had. What you and I... We don't have anything, Roman said. We never had anything. We had an arrangement that I let become something else in my head because I was too arrogant to look at it clearly. He stopped. Started again. She was alone in that house. She was alone and bleeding, and she was carrying my son and I was 50 yards underground moving you to safety while she... He stopped. His jaw worked. He turned away from her, toward the window, the same impulse as always, turning away from the room when the room had too much in it. You didn't know about the baby, Vivian said quietly. I know now. The silence expanded. How? Vivian said. Hoyle. The extraction spec. He turned back. She was moved before the assault because someone needed to account for her. She wasn't a target. She was a complication. Vivian closed her eyes for 1 second. When she opened them, they were different. Not softer. Vivian Cross did not do soft, but recalibrated, the way eyes recalibrate when the story they've been reading turns out to have a different ending than the one they expected. I didn't know she was pregnant when... She was 7 months along. Everyone in that house knew. I mean, I didn't think about it in those terms. I didn't... She stopped. And for the first time in 11 years of watching Vivian Cross manage every room she entered, Roman watched her run out of words. Not out of calculation, not out of strategy. Just out of the ordinary human capacity to make what she had done into something she could say out loud without it breaking whatever she still believed about herself. Find her, Roman said. Whatever you have, whatever Marcus shared with you, whatever channels you used during that period to track her absence, I want it, all of it. I'm going to find her myself, and you're going to help me do it. And if I don't... He looked at her. Everything Marcus built in this organization has your fingerprints on the edges, he said. I know because I know you. You wouldn't let a restructuring of this scale happen in your proximity without making sure you had a position in whatever came after, which means you have documents, accounts, communications that place you in the architecture of what Marcus planned. He paused. If you help me, none of that surfaces. If you don't, that's extortion, Vivian said. It's an arrangement, Roman said. Like ours. You always said you preferred arrangements. She looked at him for a long time. The wine glass sat untouched on the table between them. Outside, the city did what cities do. It continued, indifferent, enormous, full of people who were not in this room and did not know what was happening in it. She's not going to forgive you, Vivian said. That's not your evaluation to make. I'm not evaluating. I'm telling you, whatever you think you're going to fix by finding her. Help me find her, Roman said, or I'll burn every file in this organization until I find one with your name on the wrong line. Vivian picked up the wine glass. She drank. She set it back down. I'll make some calls, she said. But he found Serena on a Thursday afternoon in late March, which was 26 months after the night she had walked out of his house through a service exit with blood on her side and one shoe and a future she built from scratch while he was 200 miles away, being lied to by the two people he trusted most. He did not approach her, not then. He was not ready, and she was not ready, and the situation was not ready, which were three ways of saying the same thing. That the version of this confrontation he had been building in his head for the 3 weeks since Vivian's contact had produced a location was not the confrontation that would serve either of them. And Roman DeLuca, who had spent 43 years doing things at the moment that served him rather than the moment that was right, was trying to learn the difference. He sat in a parked car on the street outside a small public park in a town called Millhaven, 90 miles north of the city, and he watched. She was on a bench. She was reading something. She was wearing a gray coat and her hair was down, which was different. In all the years of the marriage, she had always worn it up, always composed, always assembled. The down hair was not casualness, he thought. It was just different. It was the hair of a person who had stopped performing for rooms and had arrived somewhere that did not require performance. Beside her on the bench, a child was eating crackers from a small container. The child was maybe 18 months old, maybe slightly more, with dark hair and the particular self-contained focus of a very young person who has not yet learned to be uncertain about whether the world is fundamentally manageable. He was not paying attention to anyone. He was attending to the crackers with total seriousness. Roman watched for 11 minutes from the car without moving. The child looked up once at a dog that passed with its owner on the path, and Roman saw his face clearly. He had to put both hands on the steering wheel, the shape of the jaw, the precise architecture of the brow. He was looking at himself at 18 months old, which he knew from a photograph his mother had kept until she died. A photograph he had memorized without meaning to because it was the only image he had of himself before the life started. He was looking at a small person who contained him, and contained Serena, and had been alive for a year and a half in a world Roman had no presence in. He sat in the car for 4 more minutes. Then he got out. He did not approach the bench. He walked to the edge of the park and stood at the path's entrance and watched and did not go closer, because going closer without preparation was what Roman the old Roman would have done, move toward the thing he wanted without accounting for what the thing wanted. He was trying to account for it. He was standing at the edge of a park in March, trying to become a different kind of man than the one he had been for 43 years, and finding, as people always find, that the trying is the worst part. Serena looked up from her book. She looked up the way people look up when something in the environment changes, some peripheral shift in attention or stillness that registers before the conscious mind catches it. She looked up and across the park, and her eyes found him the way they would find him in any room, because some patterns of recognition survive everything, survive distance and anger and 2 years of deliberate forgetting. She went very still. The child kept eating crackers, unaware. Roman did not move. He stood at the edge of the path with his hands at his sides, and he let her look at him, because the looking was the first thing, the only first thing, and he did not want to take it from her by moving before she had decided what she wanted to do with it. She closed her book. She picked up the child. She stood. She was, he could see even from this distance, afraid. Not the animal fear of physical danger, but the specific fear of a person who has built something fragile and beloved out of the rubble of a catastrophe, and who has just seen the source of the catastrophe standing 40 meters away. Roman raised one hand. Not a wave, just an acknowledgement. I see you. I'm here. I'm not moving until you decide. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then Serena walked toward him, slowly. The child on her hip, one arm wrapped around him, the child oblivious, working on the last of the crackers. She walked toward Roman with the posture of a woman who had decided that running was not the thing she was going to do. Not because she trusted him, he could see that clearly from the set of her shoulders and the line of her jaw, but because she had made herself into a person who did not run from things, and Roman DeLuca was a thing she was going to face. She stopped 6 feet from him. They looked at each other. The child looked up from the crackers and looked at Roman with dark, serious eyes that were his own eyes in miniature, and Roman felt something crack open in the center of his chest that he did not have a name for because nothing in his life had prepared him for it. His name is Ethan, Serena said. Her voice was flat and controlled and contained everything she was not going to let him see. I know, Roman said. How long have you known? 3 weeks. Something moved across her face. Not surprise. She had gone past the register of surprise with Roman DeLuca. Something harder than surprise. 3 weeks, she said. I found out about Marcus 6 weeks ago. Finding you took 3 more. A pause. Marcus? He built your extraction into the assault specification. He moved your guards before the attack started. He constructed the narrative that you left voluntarily. Roman watched her face process this. He and Vivian, together. The silence was long. Ethan finished the crackers and looked at the empty container with the philosophical expression of someone who has learned that good things end. He made a small sound. Serena shifted him on her hip without looking away from Roman. I have evidence, she said. Roman looked at her. 2 years, she said. I have had 2 years to do something other than survive, and I used some of that time to think about what happened and who built it and why, and I have been building a file. Her voice was steady, precise. The voice of a woman who had taken the composed, controlled person she had always been, and had removed everything from it that was performance and left only the functional core. I have financial records. Communication intercepts. I hired someone. It wasn't cheap. I used Ashford money I had before the marriage. I have the restructuring proposal Marcus circulated to the Voss network 18 months before the attack. I have your wife's hospital intake record under the false name I used, and the ER report that documents shrapnel wounds consistent with the specific type of fragmentation round used in the Ashford estate assault. She paused. I have enough to end Marcus Kane and everyone connected to the plan. Roman stared at her. Why didn't you use it? He said. Because using it meant surfacing, she said. And surfacing meant... She looked at Ethan, then back at Roman. I wasn't ready to have this conversation. What changed? You're standing in front of me, she said. Which means you found me. Which means the conversation is happening whether I'm ready or not. She shifted Ethan again. He had found the edge of her collar and was examining it with concentrated interest. So here's what I need you to understand. I will give you everything I have. Every document, every intercept, every record. You can use it however you need to use it, but I need something in return. Anything, Roman said. Don't say that, she said sharply. Don't say anything like you mean it. You say anything to me and I will walk back to that bench and you will never find me again. Do you understand? Because that's what the old Roman says. Anything. And then the anything turns out to have conditions that nobody told you about, and you end up alone in a dark house. Her voice had not risen. It was still flat and controlled and devastating. Tell me specifically what you're offering. Tell me what you're actually capable of, and then I'll decide. Roman looked at her for a long moment. At her face. At the child on her hip, who had given up on the collar and was now looking at Roman with those dark, serious eyes, unhurried, unafraid, the look of a person who has not yet learned that some faces are dangerous. He thought about what he was capable of. He thought about it with more honesty than he had applied to the question in his entire life. I don't know yet, he said. I know I'm going to dismantle what Marcus built and what's left of the organization that allowed it to exist. I know I'm going to make sure every person involved in what happened to you that night faces something real and legal and final. I know that whatever I do after that, I want to do it somewhere that Ethan is safe." He stopped. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm not asking you to come back to anything that looks like what we had. I'm asking you to let me prove something over time. That's all I'm asking." Serena looked at him. Ethan made a small, decisive sound and reached out one hand toward Roman's face with the absolute confidence of someone who has not yet learned about boundaries. Roman held very still. He let the small hand touch his jaw. He felt the warmth of it. He did not move. Serena watched this. Her expression did not change, and yet something behind it shifted, microscopic, the specific movement of a woman who had sworn to herself that the past was over and who was finding, in this moment, on this path, in this ordinary March afternoon, that the past had opinions about whether it was over. "I want to meet somewhere tomorrow," she said. "Neutral location. I'll bring the files. You'll come alone." A pause. And Roman, her eyes went to his, direct and hard and entirely clear. "If Marcus finds out I'm alive before we're ready, if he finds out about Ethan, I will never forgive you for it. Not for any reason, not for any amount of time." "He won't find out," Roman said. "You said that already tonight," she said. "You said you'd make sure I was protected at that party." She turned and walked back toward the bench. Roman stood on the path and watched her go and felt the weight of that sentence settle into every part of him, down to the level where all the old justifications lived, all the operational rationalizations, all the times he had converted the unbearable into the procedural and moved on without looking at what he left behind. It settled into all of those places, and it stayed. He was still standing there when his phone vibrated. He looked at the screen, a text from a number he didn't recognize. 5 words. "I know where she is." Roman's blood went cold. He looked up, scanning the park, the path, the street beyond, the automatic threat assessment of a man who has survived by reading environments. Nothing visible. No surveillance he could identify. No car he recognized on the street. But the text was there, glowing on the screen, and the 5 words it contained meant that the 3 weeks of careful, quiet searching he had done to find Serena, the channels he had used, the calls Vivian had made, somewhere in that chain, something had leaked. He typed back, "Who is this?" 3 seconds. "Someone who's been watching Marcus watch you look for her. You have maybe 48 hours before he finds her himself. Maybe less." Roman looked at the message. Then he looked across the park at Serena, who had reached the bench, who had sat back down, who was letting Ethan down onto the path where he stood with the determined wobble of a child who had recently learned to walk and had not yet accepted that falling was a consideration. 48 hours. Marcus already knew he was looking, which meant everything Roman had thought was careful and quiet and contained was none of those things. And the confrontation he had been preparing for, the measured, documented, legal dismantling of Marcus Kane's network, had just been given a deadline it had not had 60 seconds ago. And the deadline was the kind that did not negotiate and did not extend, and at the end of which a woman and a child in a town called Millhaven would no longer be hidden. Roman put the phone in his pocket and walked back toward the bench. He walked back to the bench, and he did not run, because running in a public park in the late afternoon would mean something to anyone watching, and someone was watching, had been watching, which meant the next 4 minutes needed to look like nothing. Serena saw him coming. She read his face the way she had learned to read it in 3 years of a marriage built on surfaces. Not the surface he presented to rooms, but the specific quality of stillness he applied when the situation had gone critical and he was doing the math on it in real time. She had cataloged that stillness without intending to, the way you catalog the sounds of a house you're not sure you're safe in. She stood up before he reached her. She picked up Ethan. "What happened?" she said. "Someone texted me. Unknown number. They know I've been looking for you. They're saying Marcus has maybe 48 hours before he finds this location himself." She did not panic. He had counted on this, and she delivered it. No widened eyes, no sharp breath, just a compression of the jaw and a tightening of her arm around Ethan that the child registered by looking up at her face with his serious dark eyes. "How?" she said. "I don't know yet. I used Vivian to make the initial contact inquiries. Something in that chain." "Vivian." Her voice was flat and precise, the voice of a woman filing information in the correct location. "You used Vivian Cross to find me." "I know." "Roman." "I know. We need to move. Is there somewhere you go that isn't here? Isn't your house? Somewhere that has no connection to your current name or pattern?" She was already thinking. He could see it. The rapid internal inventory, the assessment of options against criteria, the same kind of operational processing he did himself, which he had never noticed in her during the marriage because he had not been paying attention to her as a person capable of it. "There's a woman. She helped me when I first came here. She has a property outside town, a farmhouse. She knows my situation in general terms. Can you call her right now?" "Yes." "Do it. Go directly there. Don't go back to your house." "Ethan's things are at the house. Leave them." She looked at him, not with anger, with the specific look of a woman measuring whether the instruction is operational or controlling, which was a distinction she had learned to make out of necessity. She decided operational. She pulled out her phone. Roman turned away to give her the call and typed a reply to the unknown number. "Who are you and what do you want?" The response came in 11 seconds. "Nothing from you. I want Marcus finished. I've been inside his secondary network for 8 months. My name doesn't matter. What matters is he has a man in Millhaven. Arrived this afternoon, 2 hours before you did. He's not there for you." Roman's stomach dropped. "He's not there for you." He typed, "Where?" A pause, then an address. A street Roman did not recognize, then Silver Prius, parked on Alderman. "He's been on the woman's apartment building since 4 p.m. He doesn't have the park. Not yet." Roman looked up. The park. The bench. The entrance path where he had been standing when he read the first text. Visible from Alderman if Alderman ran parallel to the east boundary, which he was calculating now from memory of the route he'd driven in. He had been standing in potential sightline for 6 minutes. He turned back to Serena. She was ending the call. "The farmhouse," she said. "She's there. I can go now." "There's a man on your building," Roman said. "He's been there since 4. He doesn't know the park, but he will when you don't come back." He kept his voice level. He watched her absorb this without breaking. "You're going to walk out the north exit of this park, the direction opposite your building, and you're going to get into a cab or a rideshare, not your car, and go directly to the farmhouse. You're not going to your building tonight." "And you?" "I'm going to deal with the man on Alderman." "Roman, take Ethan and go, right now. Text me the farmhouse address when you get there, and do not contact anyone else." She looked at him for 2 seconds. Then she said, "Don't get killed before tomorrow. I still need to give you those files." She turned and walked north without looking back, and Roman watched the shape of her go. His son on her hip, the gray coat, the dark hair. And then he turned and walked east toward the park entrance and pulled his phone up to call the only 3 men in his organization whose phones were not routed through any infrastructure Marcus had ever touched. The man in the silver Prius was named Doyle. Roman knew this because the unknown contact sent him a photograph and a name while he was in the cab going to Alderman, and because Roman had a residual memory of a Doyle who had worked perimeter security for Marcus 18 months ago, a quiet man, capable, who had left the organization officially after a restructuring that Roman now understood to have been a cover for Marcus, quietly building a parallel personnel structure beneath the visible one. Roman had his 3 men positioned on Alderman inside 20 minutes. He watched from the far end of the street in the back of the cab with the window down and the cold March air coming in while his man Reyes confirmed the Prius from a cross-street angle, and his man Torres confirmed a second vehicle, a dark SUV, parked 2 blocks north, which the unknown contact had not mentioned and which meant Marcus had sent 2, not 1. 2 meant observation plus extraction capacity. 2 meant Marcus was not just watching. 2 meant if Serena had gone back to her building tonight, she would not have gotten back out. Roman felt the cold of this settle into him and harden. He called Marcus. It rang 3 times, then, "Roman." The voice of a man who had been waiting for this call and had prepared for it the way he prepared for everything, completely, patiently, with the confidence of someone who believes their preparation is superior to whatever the other party has managed. "You have people in Millhaven," Roman said, a pause that was just long enough. I have people in a lot of places. That's always been part of my function. Pull them. I don't think I'm going to do that. Marcus, you hit me in the face yesterday and told me I was finished, Marcus said. His voice was still level, still the voice of the professional, the subordinate, the right hand, all those years of practice to register. And then you went looking for something, and whatever you found, you're calling me from an unknown number at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, which tells me the something wasn't what you were hoping. A pause. Where is she, Roman? Know where you're going to get to. I've been running operations in this organization since before you had a real organization to run. I have infrastructure you've never seen. I have people in positions you never thought to look at. The voice was not threatening. It was informational, which was worse. The voice of a man who has moved past the stage of threatening because he believes the threatening stage is over. Whatever you think you've built in the last 6 weeks with whatever people you think you've kept off my network, you haven't. I know about Torres. I know about Reyes. I know about the Caldwell property you've been using since February. Another pause. I've been 3 steps ahead since the night of the party, Roman. That hasn't changed. Roman said nothing. He was watching the Prius on Alderman. Doyle had not moved. The dark SUV had not moved. Here's what's going to happen, Marcus said. You're going to tell me where Serena is. I'm going to make sure she understands that what happened 2 years ago was not targeted at her specifically, and that she and the child are safe going forward, provided she stays out of DeLuca business permanently. In exchange, I'll give you a transition structure that keeps you out of federal reach and leaves you with enough of the legitimate side of the business to live very well for the rest of your life. He paused. It's a fair offer. Better than what you'd get fighting this. And Ethan? Silence. He's mine, Roman said. Whatever else you're offering, you understand that he's mine, and that's not a negotiating point. I understand that's how you feel. Marcus, Roman's voice went to the basement register. If you move on her tonight, if either of those cars moves, I will burn every piece of documentation I have on the restructuring plan, the Voss negotiation, the interior assault coordination, and I will deliver it personally to the FBI field office on Meridian Street. And I will walk in there with a lawyer, and I will say whatever I need to say about my own culpability to make sure every charge lands on you specifically. He paused. I've been building that file for 6 weeks. So have you. The difference is mine has your name on the lines that matter, and yours has mine on the lines that don't matter anymore because I'm willing to burn myself to make sure you go down with me. The silence was long. You're bluffing, Marcus said. Test it, Roman said. He ended the call. He sat in the back of the cab and breathed and waited and watched the Prius and the dark SUV on his phone's map via Torres's position marker. For 11 minutes, nothing moved. Then the Prius started, pulled out, made a right on Grover and headed north. The dark SUV followed 2 minutes later. Roman exhaled. He pressed the back of his head against the cab's headrest and closed his eyes for 3 seconds, which was all he allowed himself. Then he called Torres. They're moving, Torres said. I see it. Let them go. Don't follow. You sure? No. Let them go anyway. Chotsan. The farmhouse was 12 miles outside Millhaven on a road that had no streetlights and a gravel drive that announced every vehicle that used it. Roman arrived at 9:40 p.m. in a car he had borrowed from a contact in the next town, and the woman who owned the farmhouse, she gave her name as Claire, mid-60s, eyes that had seen several varieties of serious trouble and had not been diminished by any of them, met him at the door with a look that said she was evaluating whether to let him in and that the evaluation was genuine. She said you'd come, Claire said. Is she here? She's here. Claire did not move from the doorway. She also said to tell you that she has a hunting rifle and that she's a better shot than she looks. I believe it, Roman said. Claire stepped aside. Serena was in the kitchen. Ethan was asleep on a folded blanket on the couch in the adjoining room, visible through the open doorway, his chest rising and falling with the absolute trustful depth of a sleeping child. Roman looked at him for a moment before he looked at Serena. She had a mug of something on the table in front of her and a manila folder closed beside it, and she looked at Roman with the expression she had been wearing since the park. Not warmth, not hostility, but the complicated alertness of someone who has made a decision they're not entirely sure of and is watching for evidence about whether the decision was correct. He pulled the cars, Roman said. I know. You texted. I wanted to say it in person. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat. The kitchen was warm. It smelled like coffee and old wood, and the particular smell of a house that has been lived in by someone who takes care of things. He made an offer. Transition structure, legitimate assets, stay out of his way. What did you say? I said no. She looked at him. He's not going to stop. No. Pulling the cars tonight is tactical. He's resetting, not retreating. Yes. So we have maybe 24 hours before he recalibrates and comes at this differently. Roman put his hands flat on the table. I need the files. Tonight. And I need to know everything you have on the Voss negotiation specifically. The documents, the chain of contact, whoever Marcus used as the Voss side intermediary. Serena pulled the folder toward her but didn't open it. There's a man named Sutter, Gideon Sutter. He was the Voss side point of contact for the restructuring negotiation. He's a lawyer, legitimate practice, but he handled the document architecture for the deal. She paused. He's also the man who arranged the false name intake process at the hospital. He has a contact inside Mercer County General who processed my admission records. Roman stared at her. How do you know about Sutter? Because 2 months after Ethan was born, I hired a private investigator and told him to start from the hospital end and work backward. She opened the folder. Pages, photographs, printed emails, financial records. She turned them toward him. Sutter kept copies of everything. He's that kind of man. He builds insurance into every arrangement he makes. My investigator found the copies in a secondary storage account Sutter uses for sensitive client files. She paused. He doesn't know we have them. Roman looked at the pages. The weight of what was in front of him, 2 years of her work, assembled in a farmhouse kitchen 90 miles from the city, built by a woman with a newborn and shrapnel scars and no resources except intelligence and determination, hit him in a way he didn't have language for and wasn't going to try to produce language for right now. This is enough, he said. It's more than enough. It's everything. She kept her voice level. Marcus goes down, Vivian goes down, Sutter goes down, and the Voss network faces RICO exposure on the restructuring negotiation alone. She paused. But you have to move on it before Marcus moves on us. If he gets to Sutter first, he won't. How are you going to... Roman's phone went off. Not a text, a call, the unknown number from earlier. He looked at Serena. She looked at the phone. He answered. Change of situation, the voice said. Male, mid-40s, controlled. Roman had been trying to place it since the first text and was still unable to. Marcus didn't retreat tonight. He relocated. He's not coming after the woman. He went for the child. The kitchen went very cold. Say that again, Roman said. He pulled the Millhaven surveillance because he found a better pressure point. He has people at the daycare your son attended, past tense. The woman took the child with her tonight, so he came up empty. But he knows the name the child is enrolled under. He knows the daycare's address. He knows the backup contact listed in the enrollment form. A pause. He's going to use the child to bring you to a location of his choosing where the terms are his. Roman was on his feet. He did not remember standing up. Serena was watching his face with the expression of a woman reading a situation she could not yet hear. When? Roman said. He's already moving. He's got people in Millhaven right now. Not the Alderman team. A second team you didn't know about. They're 40 minutes from the farmhouse at current speed. How do you know where the farmhouse is? Because I've been inside Marcus's secondary network for 8 months, and Marcus's secondary network has been tracking the woman since she arrived in Millhaven 14 months ago. A pause. He let her stay because she was useful as a pressure point. He's been keeping her location in reserve for exactly this kind of situation. Roman felt the specific sensation of a floor disappearing, not metaphorically, the physical sensation of the ground becoming unreliable, the vestibular system registering a threat the eyes couldn't confirm. 14 months. Marcus had known for 14 months and had said nothing, had let Roman search and come up empty, and had watched the search go cold and had filed the location away like a tool in a drawer, waiting for the moment when the tool was needed. Who are you? Roman said. Someone who was inside long enough to see what Marcus built and made the decision that it needed to end on terms that don't involve me going down with it. A pause. I've sent everything I have to a federal contact. It goes live in 72 hours regardless of outcome. But you don't have 72 hours for the child. You have 40 minutes. The call ended. Roman put the phone on the table. He looked at Serena. Her face had gone to the expression he had seen in the park. Not fear, that harder thing, the thing past fear that a person arrives at when they have already survived the thing they were most afraid of, and understand that survival is not the same as safety. Ethan, she said, not a question. Marcus has a team 40 minutes out. He knows about this location. Roman was already moving, already building the sequence. We need to go right now. I need to call Torres and Reyes. Is there another exit from this property? Claire appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had heard enough. Backfield, she said. There's a gate in the fence line. Opens to the county road. My truck's in the barn. Keys. She produced them from her pocket. Roman took them and looked at Serena, who was already moving toward the couch where Ethan slept. She lifted the boy and he stirred and made a small protesting sound, and she held him against her chest and he subsided. They went out through the back. The county road was dark and straight, and Roman drove Claire's truck with the lights off for the first quarter mile until the farmhouse was fully out of sight. Then he turned the lights on and called Torres. I need you and Reyes at the intersection of Route 9 and Millhaven County Road 4, he said. Bring whatever you're carrying, now. 30 minutes, Torres said. 25. He ended the call. Beside him, Serena sat with Ethan on her lap, the child awake now, disoriented, looking at the dark outside the window with the serious, confused face of someone who has been relocated without explanation. She had one arm around him and her other hand flat on the seat beside her, braced. She was not shaking. Her breathing was controlled. Roman watched this from the peripheral and felt the specific thing he had been feeling intermittently since the park. The recognition of a person he had not known was in the room with him all along. He's been watching me for 14 months, she said. Yes. He let me build a life. He let Ethan grow up enough to walk and talk and be a person. Her voice was level and terrible. So that taking him would mean something. Roman said nothing because there was nothing to say that was adequate. Where are we going? She said. I don't know yet. He meant it. The operational picture was shifting in real time. Marcus ahead of him, a second team in the field, the unknown contact's clock running, Torres 30 minutes out. He was building the plan in the spaces between these facts, and the plan kept changing shape because the ground kept changing. His phone went off. Unknown number, text this time. He's not going to meet you anywhere clean. He wants the warehouse. Caldwell Port, Building 7. He's been using it for 14 months as a secondary operations center. He'll send the meet location to you in 20 minutes. That's where it goes. He has 4 men there already. He'll bring 6 more when he sends the location. Roman read it and handed the phone to Serena without explanation. She read it. She handed it back. He's going to take us there, she said. He'll make contact once he has Ethan and tell you to come alone. He doesn't have Ethan. He will if he has a second team and we're on a county road at night. Roman looked at the road ahead. He was doing the math. The farm team was 40 minutes out from the farmhouse, which meant 15 to 20 minutes from their current position, depending on how fast Marcus's people were moving and whether they had the county road flagged as an exit route, which they did not yet. But the window was closing. He turned off the county road and went east, away from Route 9, away from the Torres intercept point. Serena looked at him. Wrong direction, she said. Different plan. He was on the phone again, this time a number he had not used in 2 years. A contact in the federal system, an agent named Carver who had approached him 18 months ago with a cooperation inquiry that Roman had declined at the time because the terms were wrong, and because at the time he was still operating under the assumption that his organization was intact. The terms were different now. Everything was different now. Carver picked up on the second ring. DeLuca, Carver said, the voice of a man who had been waiting for this call for a year and a half and was not going to let surprise show. I have documentation on Marcus Kane, restructuring of a criminal organization, conspiracy to commit assault, RICO exposure on a Voss network negotiation, and obstruction connected to the Ashford Estate incident 26 months ago. Roman kept his voice flat and operational. I also have a current situation. Armed personnel in Millhaven, imminent threat to a civilian and a child, and a secondary operations center at Caldwell Port Building 7, where the principal is staging. A pause. How long have you had this documentation? Long enough. I need federal presence at Caldwell Port in 90 minutes, and I need someone in Millhaven right now on a protective detail for a woman named Roman. Serena's hand was on his arm. He looked in the rearview mirror. Headlights. 2 sets. Coming fast on the county road behind them, closing distance with the deliberate speed of vehicles that know exactly where they're going. I have to call you back, Roman said. He dropped the phone on the seat and pushed the truck to whatever Claire's truck was capable of, which was enough to feel in the frame, but not enough to outrun what was behind them. How many? Serena said. She was turned in the seat, looking back, Ethan now fully awake and gripping her coat with both fists. 2 vehicles, 4 to 6 men. He took a left onto a road he didn't know. Gravel, trees on both sides. There's a phone in my jacket inside pocket. Get it out. She got it. He told her the number to dial. She dialed and held the phone to his ear while he drove. Torres answered. Change of position, Roman said. County Road 4 going east. I just turned onto a gravel access road heading north. 2 pursuit vehicles behind us. I need you to find the north end of this road and come at it from the other direction. I don't have the road on my... Find it. 15 minutes. Go. He took another turn. The gravel gave out and became dirt, and the truck lurched, and Ethan made a sharp, frightened sound, and Serena held him tighter and said something low to him that was not for Roman, was just for the child, just the specific frequency of a mother's voice telling a small person that the world is still manageable even when the evidence is against it. The headlights behind them stayed. Then one set dropped away. Roman watched the mirror. One vehicle had taken the wrong turn, or a different turn, was going around rather than following directly, which meant they were trying to cut ahead, which meant they knew this road well enough to know where it came out. They have this route, Roman said. How? Marcus has had 14 months to map everything in this county connected to you. He was calculating the distance to the road's end, which he didn't know, against the distance the flanking vehicle needed to travel, which he also didn't know. Where does this road come out? I don't know. I've never been on it. One headlight behind, one ahead, somewhere, moving to intercept. Ethan was crying now, not screaming, a small, frightened, exhausted sound. The sound of a child who has been woken in the dark and moved through cold air and can sense without understanding that the adults around him are afraid. Serena was talking to him steadily. Her voice did not waver. Roman had both hands on the wheel and his jaw set and the truck going as fast as the road allowed. The road ended. Not a junction. A gate. A locked farm gate across the road. Metal, substantial, the kind that does not open when you hit it at 20 miles an hour, but does at 40. Roman hit it at 43. The gate went sideways off its post, and the truck bucked and Ethan cried out and Serena braced against the dash. And then they were through, onto pavement, a 2-lane state road, and Roman turned left without stopping to think because left was away from where the flanking vehicle would logically be coming from, and right now logic was all he had. 200 meters up the road, headlights appeared ahead. The flanking vehicle. Right on time. Roman turned the truck across the road and stopped it sideways. He looked at Serena. Get out. Take Ethan into the trees on the right side. Stay down. Don't move until Torres calls this number. He handed her the second phone. Go. Roman. Serena. Go. She went. She was out of the truck with Ethan before Roman had finished the sentence, moving fast and low toward the tree line on the right side of the road, and Roman watched her go for 1 second, just one. And then he reached under the seat where he had put the weapon he'd been carrying since Caldwell, and he got out of the truck. The flanking vehicle stopped 30 meters ahead. Doors opened. He counted 3. Behind him, the pursuit vehicle came through the broken gate, and its lights swept across the road and hit the truck, and stopped. 4 behind, 3 ahead. Roman DeLuca stood between them in the dark on a state road in the middle of nowhere with a gun in his hand and his son in the trees and the complete clarifying understanding that he was out of road. Then Torres's car came over the rise from the south at 90 miles an hour with its lights on full and Reyes leaning out the passenger window, and the equation changed. What happened in the next 4 minutes was not clean. It was not precise. It was 4 minutes of noise and movement, and the particular violence of men who have made their decisions and are executing them at close range in the dark. And when it was over, there were 2 of Marcus's men on the ground, 3 more who had run into the trees. Torres had taken a graze on his left arm that he was not acknowledging, and Roman was standing in the road with blood on his jacket from a cut above his eye that he had received from the edge of a car door during the second minute, and which was currently making it difficult to see clearly out of his left side. He wiped his eye with the back of his hand. He looked at Torres. "Carver," he said. "Federal. The number's in the phone on the truck seat. Tell him we need Caldwell Port Building 7 in the next 60 minutes, and we need it now." Torres took the phone. Roman walked to the tree line. Serena was there. Ethan was against her chest, his face buried in her neck, his crying reduced to the intermittent shuddering breath of a child who has run out of energy for the fear itself. She looked at Roman, at his face, the blood, the jacket, and her expression did not change. "Are you hit?" she said. "No, cut. Torres's arm is worse." The men. 2 down. 3 ran. More coming to Caldwell when Marcus realizes this didn't go the way he planned. He wiped his eye again. "I need you to stay with Torres. I'm going to Caldwell." "No," she said. "Serena, I'm not staying here while you go into a building full of his men alone." Her voice was the voice from the park, flat, precise, all the performance stripped out of it. "I'm the one with the documentation. I'm the one who knows what Sutter built. If something happens to you at that warehouse and I'm not there, everything dies with it." She paused. "And that's not happening." Roman looked at her, at the blood on his jacket reflected in the truck's headlights, at his son's small back rising and falling against her chest, at the particular expression on her face that he had been misreading for 3 years as composure when it was, in fact, something else entirely. It was resolution, the expression of a person who has decided, all the way down, without reservation. "He'll have 6 men at the warehouse," Roman said. "I know." "It's not Roman." She cut him off, not loud, precise. "I have spent 2 years preparing for this. I didn't build that file to hand it to someone else at the finish line." She shifted Ethan and looked at him. "He's coming with us. I'm not leaving him in a tree line." Roman looked at his son. Ethan had lifted his head from Serena's neck and was looking at Roman with the same dark, serious eyes from the park bench, wet from crying, exhausted, but attentive in the specific way that children are attentive when they sense the adults around them are making decisions that matter. Roman reached out and put his hand on the back of Ethan's head. Just for a moment. The warmth of it went through his palm and up his arm and settled somewhere he was not going to examine right now. "Okay," he said. He turned toward Torres. "Caldwell Port," he said. "Building 7. All of us." Torres was already on the phone with Carver. Roman looked at the road ahead. Dark, straight, the city lights beginning to show as a low orange glow on the horizon. 60 minutes. 6 men in the building already. More coming. Marcus somewhere is that building, or heading toward it, or watching from it. The man who had been 3 steps ahead since the night of the party, who had built a deception so thorough and so patient that Roman had lived inside it for 2 years without knowing the walls were not walls at all, but a structure someone else had designed for someone else's purpose. He got into the truck. The city lights grew as they drove toward them. And somewhere in Building 7 at Caldwell Port, in the warehouse where Marcus Kane had spent 14 months building the final stage of everything he had planned, a phone rang twice and Marcus answered it and listened to the report from the county road and said nothing for a long moment, and then said, in the voice of a man recalibrating rather than retreating, "Bring me the boy." The rain started 20 minutes outside Caldwell. Not a gradual build. It arrived the way everything had arrived in the past 48 hours, without warning and all at once, sheeting across the windshield in waves that the truck's wipers couldn't fully manage. Roman drove with both hands on the wheel and the city lights ahead smearing in the wet glass, and his eye still bleeding slowly from the cut above the brow, which he had stopped trying to manage because the blood was going to do what it was going to do, and he needed both hands for other things. Serena sat beside him with Ethan asleep across her lap. The child had cried himself out somewhere on the county road and had descended into the deep, trusting sleep of someone who has surrendered the problem to the adults and is waiting to wake up somewhere better. His mouth was slightly open. One small hand was curled against Serena's knee. Roman watched the road and was aware of the child in his peripheral vision, the way you are aware of a source of light. Not looking at it directly, but oriented toward it, everything in you knowing where it is. Torres followed in his own car. Reyes was driving with his left hand because his right was pressed against the graze on his arm. They had wrapped it with a shirt from the truck's back seat. It was not enough, but it was what they had. Roman's phone sat on the dash showing Carver's last text. Teams moving. ETA, building, 7:62 minutes. Do not engage before federal presence. He had read it 4 times. He was going to engage before federal presence. He understood this, and Carver probably understood this, and the instruction was in the text anyway because Carver was a federal agent, and federal agents put the instructions in the text regardless of what they expect the other party to do with them. He said, "Bring me the boy," Serena said. Roman looked at her. "The call from the county road. Someone on your team heard it." Torres. "He told you." "On the drive, yes." She was quiet for a moment. The rain hit the windshield. Ethan's breathing was slow and even against her lap. "He's been keeping me alive for 14 months because I'm useful as leverage. Now he wants to use Ethan instead." She paused. "Which means he's decided I'm not the right pressure point anymore. Which means he thinks you care more about Ethan than about me." "He's right," Roman said. Then, "Not in the way he means it. Not because you matter less, because Ethan is—" He stopped. The words were wrong. He tried again. "Because if something happens to Ethan because of what I am, I don't have a way back from that, and Marcus knows it." Serena looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the road. "Then we make sure nothing happens to Ethan," she said. "That's the whole plan. Everything else is secondary." "Everything else is secondary," Roman agreed. "The files go to Carver when this is done. All of them. Everything I built and everything your contact has been sending. Complete package." "Yes." "And you?" He glanced at her. "What does Carver get from you?" she said. Roman was quiet for a beat. "Testimony. Whatever he needs to make the Marcus charges stick at the federal level. My cooperation on the organization structure. The parts that matter for prosecution." He paused. "I'm not walking into that building as a free man after tonight. I know that. Whatever arrangement Carver and I worked out, there's a cost attached to it, and the cost is real." Serena absorbed this. She looked at her sleeping son. "How long?" "I don't know yet. Depends on what I give them and what they need and how the charges land on everyone else." He paused. "Could be nothing if the cooperation is complete enough. Could be 2 years, could be more. I don't know." "You're telling me this now?" "I'm telling you this now because I should have told you things before and I didn't, and I am trying. I am genuinely trying to not be the man who decides what you know based on what's convenient for him." The rain came harder. The Caldwell Port signs appeared on the roadside, green and reflective in the headlights, industrial distance markers counting down the kilometers to the water. "Okay," Serena said. Just that. One word which was not forgiveness and was not acceptance and was not a promise. It was the word of a woman who was filing the information in its correct location and would deal with it when the immediate situation allowed, which was the only way to deal with any of it tonight. Roman turned toward the port. Caldwell Port at 11 p.m. in the rain was the specific kind of empty that industrial spaces achieve at night. Not quiet, because the water and the metal in the distance made their own noise, but absent of people, which is a different thing. The loading cranes stood against the low orange sky like the skeletons of something enormous. The dock lights made yellow pools on the wet concrete that the rain broke into rings. Building 7 was at the far end of the main dock road, a converted freight warehouse, its loading bays closed. 2 vehicles parked outside that Roman clocked from 200 meters as he cut the truck's lights. He pulled over behind a row of shipping containers and killed the engine. Torres pulled in behind him 30 seconds later. They got out. The rain was cold and immediate. Roman's cut had stopped bleeding somewhere on the drive and had dried to a dark line above his eye that pulled when he moved his brow. Ethan woke when the truck stopped. He made a small sound, disoriented, and Serena held him and spoke quietly to him until he subsided into wakefulness rather than alarm. He sat on her lap and looked out the rain-blurred window at the cranes and the dock lights, with the serious attention of a child processing a world that is larger and stranger than usual. Roman opened the passenger door. He looked at Serena. "Stay here until I've cleared the entry point. Torres is here." "Roman, I know what you said. I need 2 minutes to see what we're walking into. 2 minutes." He held her gaze. "I'll call." She let him go. He went around the container line with Reyes. Torres was staying with the car, with Serena, with Ethan, with the second phone and Carver's number, moving low and fast along the row, the rain covering the sound of their movement the way rain covers everything, indifferent and useful. The two vehicles outside Building 7 were a black SUV and a gray cargo van. Roman checked the van's plates against what Torres had pulled from the county road. Different vehicles, which meant the 4 men from the warehouse, plus potentially more. Reyes tapped his arm, pointed. A man standing at the building's side door. Standing rather than patrolling, which meant he had been told to hold position, which meant the position was the thing that mattered, which meant Marcus was inside and the door was the only way in that wasn't a loading bay. Roman looked at the door, then at the loading bays, then at the roofline. He pulled out his phone and typed to the unknown contact, the only avenue he had for real-time intelligence from inside Marcus's network. How many in Building 7? The response came in 40 seconds. 6 inside. Marcus, 2 of his senior men, Vivian Cross, and 2 outside contractors. 1 at the side door you're looking at. 1 on the roof, south corner. Roman read this twice. Vivian. Vivian was in the building. He had not known this, and the unknown contact had not volunteered it until now, which told him something about the sequence of information the contact was choosing to release and for what purpose. But he filed that for later. He typed, "Why is Vivian there? She came to Marcus 3 hours ago. She brought something. I don't have the detail on what." Roman thought about Vivian's face in her apartment. The wine glass. "I'll make some calls." He thought about the digital records, the files she had mentioned, the documentation she had access to through her 11 years of proximity to everything Roman had built and everything Marcus had diverted from it. He thought about a woman who had participated in the architecture of a betrayal, and who had, upon realizing the betrayal was about to be fully exposed, made the calculation that Vivian Cross always made. Which side has better odds, and how do I make sure I'm on it? She had gone to Marcus. She had brought him something. Roman put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Reyes. He made 2 gestures. The roof? The door. Reyes nodded. They separated. Roman went for the roof access on the building's north side, which was a fixed ladder behind a ventilation unit, wet and cold, each rung requiring both hands, the cut above his eyes starting to pull again with the effort. He went up in the rain, and he did not think about what was inside the building, and he did not think about Serena and the child 200 meters away in the truck. He focused on the rungs, one and the next and the next. The man on the south corner of the roof had his back to the north side. He was watching the dock road, the approach, the lit areas. He was not watching the shadow that came across the roof in the rain from the north. Roman was fast and quiet, and the man went down without a sound, which was not clean and was not something Roman would examine closely later, but which was necessary in the way that some things are necessary, which is the only honest way to characterize them. He took the man's radio. He listened. 2 exchanges in the past 30 seconds. Inside check, all clear. Inside check, all clear. He keyed twice. Short burst, the standard acknowledgement pattern he had heard from his own security people for 20 years. The radio went quiet. He texted Reyes, roof clear, side door. Reyes texted back, ready. He texted Serena, coming in, stay. Then he went down. Mpam. The inside of Building 7 smelled like seawater and machine oil, and the particular damp of a space that has been occupied for a long time without being lived in. The side door opened to a corridor that ran the length of the building's east wall, and the corridor opened to the main floor at its far end, and the main floor was where the light was. Not overhead, portable work lights on stands, 3 of them, making islands of yellow in the large dark space. Roman came in low and moved along the east wall in the shadow outside the work light's reach, and he heard voices before he saw faces. Marcus was at a table in the center of the lit space. He was sitting. The 2 senior men were standing behind him and to the sides, the geometry of a man who has arranged the room to present himself at its center, which Marcus always did, in every room, in every meeting, for 16 years, and which Roman had called professionalism and which he now understood was something else. Vivian was there. She was standing to Marcus's left, not behind him but adjacent, which put her in the space between ally and subject. She had a bag over her shoulder, the laptop bag Roman had seen her carry for years, the one she kept her personal files in. She was looking at Marcus with the expression Roman recognized as her operational face, the expression she wore when she was managing a situation at close range. Roman could not see what was on the table. He moved closer along the wall. He was close enough now to hear the exchange clearly. "The DeLuca files alone are not enough," Marcus was saying. "Carver's team has been building a parallel case for 18 months. Whatever you've brought me, I need to know it gives me something he doesn't have." "It gives you Carver's source," Vivian said. Silence. "Say that again," Marcus said. "Your unknown contact, the person inside your secondary network who's been feeding Roman intelligence for the past 6 weeks. I know who it is." She set the laptop bag on the table. "I spent the last 3 hours cross-referencing communication patterns from the past 8 months against personnel with access to your secondary network's operational logs. There are 4 people with that access. 3 of them were accounted for tonight. The 4th is a man named Garrett Foles. He's been your secondary network's financial administrator for 2 years. He also has a contact inside Carver's field office. I found the connection through a shared legal account." She paused. "Garrett Foles is your leak, and he's been feeding everything to both Roman and to Carver simultaneously." Marcus looked at the laptop bag. He looked at Vivian with the expression of a man recalibrating. Not grateful, not trusting, but processing the information against his current tactical position and finding that it changes the shape of things. "Why are you bringing this to me?" he said. "Because Roman is going to Carver," Vivian said. "And because the documentation Roman has, combined with what Carver already has, is enough to put you away and take the Voss network with it, and take me with it. And I would like to not go with it. So you're trading Foles for immunity." "I'm trading Foles and whatever leverage that gives you against Carver's case for a conversation about the terms of my exit from all of this." She held his gaze. "I've been in this world for 11 years. I know where everything is buried. I know the DeLuca organization's structure better than anyone except you. Whatever you need to preserve after tonight, I can help you preserve it. But I need something in return." Roman had been still for 2 minutes against the east wall, and he understood in the few seconds after Vivian finished speaking that he was watching a woman who had made a decision in the back seat of whatever car she had taken here that was not the decision he would have expected from her. She was not delivering him. She was not giving Marcus the location of Serena and Ethan. She was trading a name, Garrett Foles, the unknown contact, for her own survival in the specific transactional way that Vivian Cross had always survived, which was by being more valuable to the people in the room than anything else in the room. But she had not given him Serena. She had not given him Ethan. That was the thing. That was the thing that Roman was sitting with against the east wall in the dark. He stepped into the light. Marcus saw him first. The 2 men behind Marcus moved at the same instant, and Roman raised the weapon and his voice together. "Don't." They stopped. The room was very still. The rain came down on the warehouse roof in the sustained percussion of a storm that has settled in for the duration. The work lights threw shadows in 4 directions from everything they touched. Marcus looked at Roman. He looked at him with the eyes of a man who has been caught and who is assessing, still assessing, because a man like Marcus Kane does not stop assessing until the physical capacity to do so is removed from him. He looked at Roman's gun and at Roman's face and at the cut above Roman's eye, and then he looked at the door. "Reyes is at the door," Roman said. "The man outside is down. The man on the roof is down." He kept the weapon level. "And Carver's teams are 20 minutes out, maybe 15. Marcus was quiet. The two men behind you can walk out of here right now, Roman said. Through the side door. They walk. They're not part of what happens in the next 20 minutes. That's the offer. It expires in 10 seconds. A pause. Then one of the men, Roman recognized him, had known him for 8 years, a man named Shelby, who had always been competent and professional and who Roman suspected had been on Marcus's private payroll since before the party, said, Marcus. Marcus said nothing. Shelby made his decision. He walked toward the side door. The second man followed after a moment's hesitation. Their footsteps echoed on the concrete, and then the side door opened and the rain sound came in and the door closed behind them and they were gone. The room held 3 people and 2 weapons and 16 years of shared history. Put it down, Roman, Marcus said. I don't think so. You're not going to shoot me. I'm not going to need to. Roman kept his eyes on Marcus. In his peripheral, Vivian had not moved. She was standing with her hand on the laptop bag and her face doing the thing it did when she was waiting to see which way a situation resolved before committing her expression to anything. The documentation Serena built and the documentation your contact has been feeding to Carver forms a complete package. The Voss negotiation records, the assault coordination, Sutter's files, the restructuring proposal. It's complete, Marcus. There's nothing to bargain with. The only conversation left is about what you tell Carver when he gets here and whether it helps you or doesn't. Marcus looked at him. You walked in here with 1 gun and a 14-minute window. 15 now. And you think that's enough? I think it's all there is, Roman said, which is the same thing. Marcus sat back in his chair. He pressed his hands together in front of him and looked at them, a gesture Roman had never seen him make, which made it true in a way that all the familiar gestures of the past 16 years now felt like they could not be. He looked at his hands for a long moment, and then he looked at Roman. I wasn't wrong about the math, Marcus said. The organization was overexposed. The federal attention after Harmon was going to bring it down inside 2 years. I had the numbers. I had the projections. Probably, Roman said. The restructuring was the correct move. Maybe. So I was right about the problem, and I was right about the solution. And the only thing I got wrong was, you left a woman to die, Roman said. You left my pregnant wife alone in a house full of armed men, and then you spent a year building a story about why she walked out on her own, and you used that story to keep me inside a version of events that served you. That's what you got wrong. He paused. You didn't miscalculate the organization, Marcus. You miscalculated what I was willing to accept when I finally understood what you'd done. The silence between them was long and complete. Marcus nodded slowly. Not in agreement. In the acknowledgement of a man who has reached the end of the available moves and recognizes it. The boy, he said. Is he all right? Don't, Roman said. I'm asking, I know what you're asking. Don't. The word came out with everything underneath it, which was substantial, and Marcus received it and said nothing further. Vivian said, There's something you should know. Roman looked at her. Foles, your contact. He's been recording everything, not just for Carver's case. He has recordings from inside this building going back 11 months. Audio. She paused. He has Marcus on record discussing the assault coordination. He has him on record discussing Serena's security detail and the deliberate reassignment. Another pause. He sent me a copy 6 hours ago. I think he sent it to me because he knew I was going to Marcus tonight, and he wanted to make sure the recording survived regardless of what Marcus did with him when I gave him the name. Roman stared at her. Foles knew you'd give him to Marcus, Roman said. I think he decided it was an acceptable cost. Her voice was quiet. For what the recording accomplishes. Roman processed this. A man named Garrett Foles had spent 8 months inside Marcus Kane's secondary network building. A case from the inside had been feeding intelligence to both Roman and the federal system simultaneously, had anticipated being burned by Vivian, and had preemptively distributed the recording that made being burned acceptable. He had done all of this quietly, in the background, behind every other event of the past several months, for reasons Roman did not know and would probably never fully know. He thought about the text that had warned him tonight. He thought about the county road and the 40-minute window. He thought about a man he had never met who had made decisions in the dark, with full knowledge that some of those decisions would cost him personally. He filed it. He dealt with Marcus. "The recording goes to Carver with everything else," Roman said. "You're going to sit in that chair until his teams get here, and then you're going to cooperate with whatever process comes next. Not because I'm asking, because it's the only version of tonight where you have any agency over what happens after." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "And you? I'm going to walk out of here, and I'm going to spend the next hour making sure my son is warm and dry and asleep in something better than the back of a truck. Then I'm going to call Carver, and we're going to have the conversation we've been building toward for 6 weeks." He held Marcus's gaze. "I'm not walking out of my own accountability, Marcus. Whatever I owe for what this organization has been, I'm paying it. But you're paying yours first." Marcus looked at the table. He looked at his hands again. He was 60 seconds from saying something that might have been an apology, and 20 years too late to make it function like one, and Roman could see him arriving at this understanding and deciding, correctly, to say nothing. The side door opened. Reyes. And behind Reyes, Serena, with Ethan on her hip, the child wrapped in a jacket that was too large for him, his dark eyes wide and serious in the warehouse light. Roman looked at her. She looked at him. She read the room the way she had always read rooms, completely and correctly and faster than most people managed. And she crossed the floor toward the table and set the folder she was carrying on the surface in front of Marcus and looked at him. "This is the complete documentation," she said. "Everything I built in 2 years, everything your contact sent me, everything Sutter kept in his insurance archive." Her voice was the voice from the park bench, from the kitchen, from every moment in the past 48 hours where Roman had watched her operate at the precise center of herself. "Your name is on the line that matters on every page. I want you to know I built this myself. I want you to know I did it while taking care of his son alone, and that I would do it again, and that the only thing I regret about the past 2 years is the 6 weeks after the party when I was still deciding whether to disappear permanently, because if I hadn't spent those 6 weeks deciding, I would have started building sooner." Marcus looked at the folder. He looked at Serena, and something in his face changed in a way that Roman would think about later and never quite categorize. Not remorse, but something in the territory adjacent to it. The look of a man confronting not the legal consequences of what he had done, but the human dimensions of it, which are always larger and stranger than the legal consequences and cannot be managed by the same tools. He said nothing. Carver's teams came through the loading bay at 12:14 a.m. Well, the processing took 3 hours. Roman spent 90 minutes of it in a conversation with Carver and Carver's senior attorney in a temporary command area outside the building, going through the documentation, establishing the cooperation terms, telling Carver everything about the organization's structure that Carver needed to make the charges comprehensive and not subject to the kind of procedural erosion that lets cases fall apart over years of legal challenge. He was thorough. He was accurate. He did not protect anyone who did not deserve protection, which was no one. The terms were what they were. His lawyer would review them in the morning. The cooperation credit was substantial. The timeline was not nothing, but it was not what it could have been. And Roman DeLuca, at 45 years old, sat in a folding chair outside a warehouse in the rain and signed documents that ended the life he had been living for 20 years and felt the specific sensation of a man putting down a weight he has been carrying for so long that the absence of it is its own kind of disorientation. Vivian cooperated. She cooperated completely and immediately, and with the specific efficiency of a woman who has made her calculation and is now executing it without sentiment. Her testimony on the restructuring negotiation and the Voss contact chain was, Carver told Roman afterward, the single most valuable 90 minutes of the entire operation. Roman was not surprised. Vivian Cross had always been excellent at the work. The question of what she had applied the excellence to was what had taken him too long to examine. Marcus did not cooperate in the first hour. He sat in the chair where Roman had left him and said nothing to Carver's people until the recording was played, the audio that Garrett Foles had distributed from inside the building before Vivian gave Marcus his name. Roman was not in the room when it was played. He heard from Reyes that Marcus had listened to the full recording without expression and had then asked for a pen. He signed the cooperation documents at 2 a.m. Gideon Sutter was arrested at his home at 3:15 a.m. by a separate federal team. He opened the door in a bathrobe and saw the credentials and said, I've been expecting this for 14 months, which told Roman something about the kind of man Sutter was. Not a true believer in any cause, but a professional who had known the architecture was temporary and had continued to build it anyway. The specific moral vacancy of a technically excellent person who has stopped asking what the excellence is in service of. Garrett Foles was not arrested. This was the thing Roman found out at 4 in the morning, sitting on a dock piling outside Building 7 with the rain finally beginning to ease and the first gray light starting to separate the sky from the water. Carver told him directly, the way Carver did everything, without preamble. He's been a federal asset for 8 months, Carver said. He came to us before he went to you. Everything he fed you, he fed us first. The recording, the financial documentation, the Voss intermediary chain. He built it inside Marcus's network over 2 years, and he brought it to us when he had enough to make the case complete. He paused. He knew Vivian would burn him. He accounted for it. Roman looked at the water. Why did he do it? Roman said. Because he was the financial administrator for the assault funding, Carver said. He processed the money that paid for the people who were in your house that night. He didn't know what it was for when he processed it. When he found out, when the attack happened and he put together what he had moved and where it had gone, he spent a week deciding what to do about it. Carver paused again. He has a daughter, 8 years old. He told me he thought about a child in that house and he couldn't close the account on it. Roman sat with this for a moment. He did not have the language for what Garrett Foles had done, and he was not going to manufacture language for it on a dock at 4 in the morning. He filed it in the place where a few other things lived that he could not categorize and would carry regardless. Where is he? Roman said. Somewhere you won't be able to find him, Carver said. That's what he asked for, and that's what he got. Roman nodded. He looked at the water for another minute. Then he stood up, and his body registered everything the past 24 hours had done to it. The cut above his eye, the impact from the gate, the cold and the wet, and the sustained expenditure of the kind of adrenaline that leaves a debt when it's done. And he walked back toward the vehicles. Serena was in Taurus's car with Ethan when Roman found her. The car was warm. Ethan was asleep across the back seat with his head in her lap, deeply asleep. The kind of sleep that small children achieve with an ease that adults cannot access and cannot replicate. A sleep that assumes the world will be the same world when they wake. Serena looked up when Roman opened the door. She read his face. It's done, she said. Not a question. It's done. She looked at him for a moment, at the cut, the dried blood, the coat that was ruined, at his eyes, which were the eyes of a man who has gone to the end of something and come back from it, and is not entirely sure yet who he is on the other side. She reached into the bag on the seat beside her and took out a folded cloth, a dish towel from Claire's farmhouse kitchen. She had taken it without thinking when they left, the kind of thing you take without thinking when you have learned to account for small necessities. And she held it out to him. He took it. He pressed it against the cut above his eye. Thank you, he said. She looked at Ethan sleeping, at the way his chest rose and fell, at the small hand curled against the car seat. Carver's terms, she said. Cooperation credit. My lawyer reviews in the morning. Best estimate is 18 months with credit for cooperation and surrender. Could be less. Could be served in reduced security conditions. He paused. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, and I wanted you to hear it tonight before you made any plans based on a different number. Serena was quiet. I'm not asking you to wait, Roman said. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you because you deserve to have the information and decide for yourself what to do with it. 18 months, she said. Approximately. She looked at Ethan again. He's going to ask about you. He's 2 years old and he doesn't have a word for you yet, but he will. By the time 18 months passes, he's going to have questions and he's going to expect answers. She paused. I need to know what answers you want me to give him. Roman looked at his son. He looked at the sleeping face, the dark hair, the particular piece of a child who has been through something difficult and has come out the other side of it in warmth and stillness. He thought about what he wanted to say, and he thought about whether what he wanted to say was what was true, which was the standard he was trying to apply to his words now. Not what served the moment, but what was actually accurate. Tell him his father made mistakes that cost people he should have protected, Roman said. Tell him his father is working on what those mistakes cost, and that the working takes time. Tell him that when the time is done, his father is going to show up and keep showing up, and that the showing up is going to be the only argument his father makes for being in his life. He paused. If you decide to let me make it. Serena listened to this. She turned it over. She applied to it the same assessment she had been applying to Roman since the park bench, measuring it against the available evidence, against 2 years of distance and 2 years of building something without him, against the weight of what she knew and what she had survived. She said, I'll tell him the truth, that his father is complicated, and that complicated doesn't mean absent, and that absence isn't the same as not caring. She paused. That's the truth as best I understand it. That's what I'll tell him. Roman nodded. Jets. They sat in the warm car in the Caldwell Port parking lot while the rain finished and the sky began its slow change from black to gray to the specific pale color that comes just before morning commits to being morning. Ethan slept. The dock cranes stood against the lightening sky. Somewhere behind them, Carver's teams were finishing the processing of Marcus Kane's empire, boxing the documentation, photographing the warehouse, doing the meticulous work of converting a criminal architecture into a legal record. At some point, Serena said, The estate. Sold, Roman said. Already in process. Good. There are legitimate businesses, 3 of them, clean. I'm going to restructure them under a management board, people I trust who are not connected to the organization. When everything is settled, whatever's left after the federal process is finished, I'm going to put it in trust. For Ethan. He paused. And for whatever you need to build what you're building. She was quiet for a moment. I don't need your money, Roman. I know you don't. I'm not offering it because you need it. I'm offering it because it's his and because what I owe you can't be repaid with money, but the money is still owed. She thought about this. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Not now. Not tonight. Not tonight, he agreed. The sky continued its change. A container ship moved on the water in the middle distance, enormous and slow, carrying whatever it carried toward wherever it was going, its running lights still on in the pre-dawn gray. Roman watched it and felt, in the specific way you feel things when you have not slept and have gone through something that reorganized the furniture of who you thought you were. The clean simplicity of a large object moving in a predictable direction. There was something restful in it. He allowed himself to look at it for a minute. Then Ethan stirred. He moved on Serena's lap and made a small waking sound and opened his eyes, those dark, serious eyes, and looked up at the ceiling of the car and then turned his head and looked at Roman. He looked at him for a long moment with the unhurried evaluation that small children bring to unfamiliar faces, the assessment that has not yet learned to disguise itself as something more polite. He looked at Roman's face, at the cut, at the eyes, at whatever it is that children see when they look at adults that adults have long since stopped seeing in each other. Then he said, with the careful diction of a child who has recently assembled the skill of 2-syllable words, hurt. He was pointing at Roman's eye. Roman looked at the small pointing finger. He looked at the face behind it. Yeah, Roman said. A little. Ethan considered this. Then he turned to Serena and said with great conviction, Mama, hurt. I see it, baby, Serena said. Her voice was even. Her eyes were on Roman. Ethan turned back to Roman and, apparently satisfied that the situation had been properly reported to the appropriate authority, put his head back down on Serena's lap and closed his eyes. Roman sat with the warmth of that moment and did not try to contain it or convert it into something operational. He just let it be what it was, which was simple and enormous, and the kind of thing that does not need language to be completely understood. The morning came in the way mornings always come. Without announcing itself, without ceremony, the darkness simply becoming lighter, and the lighter becoming light until the distinction between night and day was a fact rather than a transition. The dock cranes emerged from the gray. The water took on color. The container ship was small in the distance now, moving toward whatever horizon it was moving toward. Roman DeLuca sat in the warm car and watched the morning arrive and thought about what came next, which was a long and complicated road with a cost attached and no guarantees of destination. He thought about this without flinching, which was new or different. The flinching had been there for so long he hadn't noticed it until it was gone. that habitual turning away from things that required stillness rather than action. He did not know if Serena would open the door she had said she might open. He did not know what Ethan would decide about him in the years of deciding that lay ahead. He did not know what would survive on the other side of the federal process, of the cooperation, of the dismantling of everything he had spent 20 years constructing. What he knew was the morning, the water, the sleeping child, the woman beside him who had survived what he had failed to prevent and had built something real from the wreckage of it, and who had looked at him across a park in March and chosen, instead of running, to walk toward him. He thought about what it cost her to walk toward him. He thought about that cost for a long time, sitting in the gray morning light, and he held it without putting it down, and the holding of it was the beginning, not of redemption, which is too large and too clean a word for what actually happens when a person tries to become less of what they were, but of the daily, unglamorous, necessary work of earning the right to be in the rooms where the people you failed are still living their lives. That was the work. He was going to do it. The morning continued to arrive. Ethan slept. The city woke around them in the way that cities always wake. Slowly, then all at once. And the world that had been dark was light. And what had been hidden was seen, and what had been broken had not been fixed but had been named, which is always the first thing, the necessary first thing, before anything else can begin.